It's been a long time. I don't remember when we recorded that. Was that in 2015, 2016?
It probably is about 2015, 2016. Because where were we? What did we do? We were. Were
We were
we?
at your place.
Were we? Yeah. Because I think
Yeah.
we were actually. Yeah. So the role of a bard in the 21st century, and it was a really interesting discussion actually. It was it was light, but actually there was this kind of like tone of the purpose of recording messages or recording story over a long period of time. So through eons, how people would pass stories down as a group or to people, much the same way a classroom works, and how you would pass lessons on through song or through word or through poetry. And
That's right. Yeah.
that's a really powerful message transition over time. I mean, is that how you still feel now? Is that the role of a bard today?
It's still pretty much applicable. Yeah. I mean, the role, because you've got to kind of differentiate between the role of the bard of then and the role of the bard now. It's a bit like the cover, because just to reiterate, and for any new listeners, I'm a member of an order called the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, which is a druidic order. And there are 3 levels, which are the bards, the ovates, and the druids. The bards are spiritual exploration through creativity. So whether that's storytelling, acting, music, poetry, it covers all of those bases there. So I've done that now. I think I was still at the bardic grade when I was talking to you originally about this. Whereas now I'm on the ovate level, which is the level of can't say level, that's not the word. The grade, there we go. So the ovate grade is exploring the world of nature. So if you're starting off in the bardic sense and exploring folklore, exploring myths and tales and such, and then an introduction into the world of magic and meaning, so to speak, then the ovate grade is an exploration of that. So it's coming into contact with the natural world all around us, how we are still part of it, and how we're still of this earth. We're not entirely separate from it. And then the druidic grade is more about diplomacy and networking and working with society and such. Sorry for the digress. I just thought I'd re-establish ground before we.
It's an interesting point because when you think about those 3 levels, effectively, to my understanding, that's the same 3 levels that exist in Freemasonry. It's the idea you would, and I think they're actually still called Bard, Ovate, and Druidic. Is that they are? I think it's the opening 3 levels of Freemasonry, where, and I could be mistaken because of course there's many different versions. I'm sure one is to understand yourself, and then is to understand and become a teacher and teach other people and learn and pass stories on, and then at a druidic level, like you said, is diplomacy, and not necessarily politics, but it's a way that we can interact and communicate with each other. And I guess that's quite interesting. Do you think that at one time, then, say the druidic and Freemasonry, I guess, were they're the same, or one's broke off from the other?
I would say that a lot of again, this is where I say you've got to compare it to the druidic order, with what being a bard is, because druids of back then, they didn't do all of this. A druid was a professor. It was the Celtic caste system of being a professor, of being an intellectual. Some of them were surgeons, some were judges, some were philosophers, some were doctors and practitioners of medicine. But the druid was a kind of cover-all term for this group of people who did all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so professionals of their level, really.
Yes, there we go. So professionals of the level. Whereas now, druid is perhaps a combination of all those things, depending on which order of druids you belong to. I'm really sorry, my phone's going to keep beeping because I'm talking to you on my phone, which means I need my Wi-Fi, and everyone on WhatsApp's now talking to each other. It's like, for fuck's sake, shut the hell up. Yeah.
I deliberately quieted everything. Just that didn't happen.
Okay, we'll just ignore it.
Okay.
So
it's fine.
So yes, what we're saying. Oh yeah. So we're talking about druids and what they are. Is that where we were?
Yeah. So kind of druids today. That kind of how the 3 levels have almost become interchangeable, and they're all
right.
together.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So because the druid of the past was the keeper of law, both in terms of law and tradition, and also the law as in, well, if you commit a crime, then you have to compensate the victim for that
Yeah,
kind of law. Because they didn't really have a prison system, they had a
I guess it'd be, yeah.
compensation system. So, say for example, I murdered somebody, that would be at best I would be excommunicated from the tribe and kicked out, and then left to fend for myself. If I committed some kind of theft, I would be excluded
What,
from the
trade?
feast table
Okay.
and from trade, and I would also have to recompense my victim for that. So whoever I stole from, I would have to give back in some way, whether that's a term of service or I have made a life boon to protect this family, or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays, modern druids are a mixture of storyteller, musician, poet, diviner, seer, healer, spiritual healing sense, and community networker. It's all of those things now. So a druid of back then would not necessarily recognize a druid of today, and vice
So
versa,
I guess the
because
role is as
they're different.
diversified, but has
Yeah,
also taken on new
yeah,
characteristics. Okay.
yeah. About the Freemason thing, I don't know about that. But what I will say is, I think a lot of modern druidry takes a lot of its inspirations from Masonry,
Yeah.
because around the time of what was called the Druid Renaissance, which actually was end of 16th century all the way up to the 20th century, a lot of the people who were interested in druids back then were people who began to romanticize them and painted them as this kind of savage barbarian culture, and so it was very fashionable to go on about, oh yes, let's look at the Greek accounts of the druids, who say that they had sacred groves that were gloomy places and they sacrificed people by the dozen. Can you believe this?
Well, I
And at
guess
the same time, they wanted to reconnect this and made it into something very, very different. It's basically a poor man's version of a fraternity system.
yeah, I can see that because I guess it would have to exist underground, or that the romanticization of it would have to
Mm.
be imagined. So we'll
Yeah,
imagine,
and
I suppose.
originally, okay, so the people who actually created the ancient order of druids, even though they only created it a couple of years ago, back in 17 something or other, they actually got together so they could play music and poetry to each other. And throughout time, it became well known because they all met up in a pub in London, Covent Garden, I think it was. And over time, it just became this huge thing with all the pomp and circumstance of Freemasonry. So they all had golden torques, sashes, symbols, everything, a lot. So they perhaps took a lot of inspiration from the Freemasonry and pretty much made their own version of that.
I was going to say that's quite interesting because I wonder if that's because a bard generally is someone who has travelled around quite extensively, and there's a particular chap who comes to mind whose name is on the tip of my tongue, but I'm not quite there, and he was trying to gather pirate songs and seafarer songs from all across the country, and
Oh yeah,
and he started releasing like CDs of these songs so they were never forgotten, and I think in many ways, a bard did that. You know, you travel from town
yes,
to village, and you would learn local lore, local history, local myths, stories, and you would tell them in a different town to a different audience who
yeah,
were like, "Oh, what's this all about?" And that's and you kind of wonder when these musicians or when these poets got together, it's kind of like, well, when I was in this town, look what I learned over here in Coventry, and look what I learned over here. It effectively was, an early version of people's internet. Really, they were sharing
yeah,
stories that they'd
yeah.
found on the road.
That's it. That's it. And so to go back to the original question is what it is the role of a bard applicable in the 21st century? I think my original answer to that in the original talk we did was it isn't. Whereas actually that was my perspective has changed on that, so I'll get onto that in a minute. But what I will say is, I think you're absolutely right in saying that it was the early version of the World Wide Web. But no, people travel. People went to different towns and villages and settlements and so forth. And so, with that, you learned news. You learned news of those places, and also brought news with you, and shared folk songs and stories and tales and folklore and things. Um, that's perhaps one reason why Robin Hood is like known throughout all of England, as opposed to just in Nottingham,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Um, I know there are people who say different, and that perhaps Robin Hood was actually the name of a gang member, and there were so many Robin Hoods because there were so many gangs. Um, I think all are applicable and all are true. But nowadays, of course, we don't have that. And a bard, we forget a bard, was also responsible for entertaining the court. So the local lord's court or the king's court. They would entertain and tell jokes and tell the news and tales. But also, it was their job to pass on status. And so if
Like pageantry.
someone wanted to be disgraced, if someone wanted to disgrace somebody else, then the bard would be employed to do exactly just that. And it was also illegal in medieval times to attack a jester, who would be a descendant of the bard. Because a jester wasn't just a fool, the jester was also there to provide status by word of mouth. Basically, if you badmouth somebody, that means their reputation's gone down the sinkhole. That's it for them.
Oh, so actually, in many ways, it was like their role was almost to be disingenuous about someone. They could tell a story or tell a fabrication, and they would tell somebody else, and the word would get around about how bad this person was, or how they didn't pay their
Yeah,
tax or do their certain thing, would disgrace them publicly. And I guess, like today, if you're a public figure, you could say something on Twitter or Facebook. It shares out really fast. But in those days, of course, you had to tell the next town, and you had to tell the next people. So yeah, I can see how such a system actually was employed.
yeah. I mean, there's also another reason there why actors were looked upon at the same level as being a prostitute,
Yeah,
because they travel and perform, and they pass on information, and they create these satires of noble people, and get the common people laughing at them, and so on and so forth.
interesting.
Um, yeah, I told you. Like I said, my perspective changed. So I would say, is a bard applicable to the 21st century? Yes. Yes, it would, because it's a tradition. It's not just a tradition in the sense of being passed down from word to mouth. It's also a tradition in that all performers are in the same guild, so to speak. So all your dancers tend to be dancers together, or your actors, even though there are many different kinds of performance, whether it's TV, whether it's theatre, whether it's street theatre, they all come from the same kind of interest of theatre. And so there's a need to perform and need to create. And even though nowadays we have television and the internet to provide us our news and our information, and indeed folklore, whether it's genuine or not, whether it's recent or not, those roles would have been given to the bard originally. But people are creative, and I would say that anybody who's creative is still carrying on that bardic thing. So if you're talking, is the bard who's learned all of his stanzas of poetry and stories from the 6th century, I don't think anybody falls into that at all, unless they're a recreationist. But there's no actual tradition from the 6th century, say, all the way up to the 21st. But anybody who is a creative person who wants to perform or put information out, that's still the role of the bard, but reinterpreted. The job may have been distributed back to different performers, but it's still kind of there. We just call it different things now. Actor, dancer, pop star, newsreader, comedian, stand-up, so on and so forth.
Yeah, because I guess I was listening to a podcast the other day talking about how stand-up effectively is such a new form of communication, and in many countries they don't even have stand-up because you're not allowed to criticize or make fun or to be disingenuous towards someone. So they don't have a form of stand-up at all. Yeah, I guess in America, Britain, I guess across the Western world, really, because I don't know how Europe has such characters. But they're to go on stage and tell stories and to make people laugh. And that is, when I think about that's what a bard does. You tell stories. And
Yeah.
there's an element that is so far. It's you have to be taken on a journey with a joke. And there's some jokes, of course, are instantly off the tongue, like a one-liner. But then other jokes are an entire story, where one part is so exaggerated that you know it's a joke. And that's what makes you laugh when you get it. It's like, and the relief when that happens is infectious. And when you get a whole group of people come together.
Like Billy Connolly, for example, he tells this wonderful... Because he falls into... Because I was talking to some friends about this online recently, about how stand-up comedians, the successful ones, they always fulfill a specific archetype of our psyche. So, for example, Jasper Carrot, that's your dad. Joe Brand, that's your mouthy, smoking auntie who doesn't give a flying monkeys what's going on. Billy Connolly, that's your eccentric uncle who has just come back from whatever country he's gone to. And so he's telling this joke about what you should do when you get caught masturbating. And so he starts telling this entire story about how when his parents burst into his bedroom once when he was young, and his reaction said, the first thing you must always do when you're having a wank and you're getting caught doing it is stop what you're doing. But the first thing you must do is disarm them by saying, "Oh, thank God you're here." And then he starts talking about how I was just taking a wee stroll in my room, and I was reading this book. You might have seen me reading a book the other day, and he reenacts the person going, yeah, I saw you reading a book. Yeah, that book was called Tarantulas and the Wily Ways. And so he just tells this entire... The basic joke is, you get caught wanking, blame it on something else. But he tells you a story. He tells you a story about a tarantula that's somehow broken free into his room through inexplicable means. But the way he delivers it, the way he says it, that's a journey. That's an entire voyage into his imagination. But he takes you with it. You can imagine that.
Yes.
That is what a storyteller is, and that's what a real storyteller can do. Whereas, of course, you get more like your quipping style of comedians as well, who are straight to the point and are a lot sharper. And I reckon that traditional court performers and bards and jesters, they were actually very similar to that. So there would have been stories and jokes that everybody knew, but the performer could also bring out new ones. So it's interesting how you say that stand-up comedy is a new form of comedy, whereas really I think it's a retreading of what was gone before, except that you haven't got Billy Connolly telling this one story that everybody knows from so many generations ago. He's telling you his stories. So, yeah, that's what I would say. Stand-up comedians are fulfilling a modern bardic role. Yeah,
they really are. So, I wonder why certain places around the world don't have them. Is it because they're not allowed to talk?
I think it's free speech. I think it's that there are countries that don't have free speech and will not allow you to talk about the state and not allow you to joke about the state, because usually they're in a totalitarian government or they are in a extremely religious government and so on and so forth. Whereas over here in the Western world, in the UK and the US, oh, how I'm loath to put those two countries together now. We have free speech, and that's what it is. We're allowed to joke about things. We're allowed to make fun of politicians and such. Was it last year or the year before where there was quite a few countries, I want to say European ones, I might be wrong, that were basically wanting to ban memes?
No, England and America actually banned memes.
Was it really?
We did, yeah.
That didn't work, did it?
No, it hasn't stopped, but the laws have actually been passed to do that, yeah.
How are they going to monitor that? Seriously. So that is an inhibition of free speech right there, because a meme is a joke. Well, a meme is an idea,
Yeah, absolutely.
but the meme that is nowadays on the internet is a whole bunch of images, as we know, with an insert joke about somebody here. Look at the whole
Yeah,
Tiger King thing.
yeah. It's to do with it's to do with the copyright law. It's called Section 11 of the copyright law. So the idea is you can't take a picture and have it mean something else without the person who created the original image getting compensated for that. And that's kind of where it sits in the copyright law. So effectively, when you make a meme, if you not referencing where it came from, that's technically illegal. Although, like you said, it's really hard to police that.
Not only that, but I think that law would only apply if someone else was making money from that, because
Um,
then you're infringing intellectual copyright.
yeah, I think a meme actually is a story in itself. You've taken you've taken two images or an image and you've added some text to it, and it changes the context entirely. Like the picture of that, there's the girl screaming, and there's the one with the cat sitting at the table. The kind
Yeah,
of the side by
yeah,
side, and it's like you said this, and the cat's like just says something else back.
yeah. There's one where you got a woman who's shouting at a cat on the table, saying, "Get down from the table," and the cat, in speech marks, is saying, "You're not my real mom."
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. Or you've got that one where you've got a little girl that's kind of like this, kind of pulling this kind of face, this kind of, and it says, "I will cut you, Susan." And
Oh, Karen.
that that or Karen, whichever. And that is brilliant because it's that already the kid's pulling a face for whatever reason. We don't know why that kid's pulling that face, but to put a successful story bit right there by saying "I will cut you," so we've already established this child's a psychopath. Um, Susan, who the fuck's Susan, and why is she doing it?
No, I think that the way that the language is changing as well is really important. It just flows on from that really nicely. It's about how there's stuff you can and can't say, or people that want you to call them a certain thing or a certain title. All that's changing now. How do you think that's going to change the lexicon of what we can and can't say? So
Yeah, I think
you can't use
we're in a
certain words. It's like a transition
yeah,
of time, isn't it?
exactly. That's what I was going to say. We're in a transitional time where words, like the N word, for example, we can't say that. We shouldn't say that. I'm fine with that. I think we're actually seeing a more active version
Policing.
of that.
Yeah. I hate to use the word. It's from the left or from the right, whatever. You can and can't say this. Whether you want to please a certain group, and I think what's sitting around that is like it's almost like tribalism. We've got our own tribe, and you can't say this because that might offend us or upset us. And everyone else has got their little tribes, so everyone's trying to work out what the boundaries are of what you can and can't say to certain people, or what we call certain people. And that right now is so all up in the air. It's like dominoes falling down, and no one really knows what the boundaries are anymore. So if you say certain things, it kind of like it will bother somebody to the point where they will scream on the internet, and all their friends will rush to save them, and it appears to be a whole wave of frustration. And then you realise that, yeah, but I feel that way too about other words.
Yeah, yeah, you will do. And because words are powerful things, and words, especially when they're taboo, they become even more powerful things. Um, so I'm not saying we should go around calling every single gay man a puff. We shouldn't do that. Um, but what I am saying is that if you start blanking a word, like say for example, rape, um, you've got to be. There's a kind of dangerous ground here because on one hand, if you start blocking a word that it has no meaning, then people won't know they've actually said something wrong, or they've not said something that they thought was offensive.
Yeah.
Whereas if you give a word too much power, then when can you use that word?
That's a really interesting way of putting that. Actually, you take the power away from a
So
word.
yeah. So you're either diluting it so it becomes so
Meaningless.
weak that people will use it in the wrong context, or you give a word so much power that it becomes that strong that it's then ignored. But because it's ignored, it's almost like you said what?
Yeah, There's this joke by like comedian George Carlin, which is the 7 words you can't say on TV at that time, 1967. Very famous stand-up comedian. Like,
Yeah, man, I realised I've just dropped the F-bomb at least 3 times on here already. Sorry.
don't worry about it, it's fine. But that's the joy of the internet. It's now as a platform where you can say anything from your little point of the internet. You can. I think now there's a whole new wave of creativity that is happening on the internet, where people can literally take control of their. Because, like, for instance, television has completely changed. Television is now almost entirely the internet, and most people, I don't think, can differentiate between YouTube and a TV channel. When it comes to certainly the younger generation. And I think from there, you've got everyone can be creative in their own way. So like we all have our own like websites, or we have our own YouTube channels, or we have a Twitter account. We've all became our own, producer and our own director and our own actor, and our own portion of the internet. So what we're saying in our own little circles, our own little tribes, can become. You're almost separating everyone else. And if people are interested in what we're talking about, people will come and have a look. It's so interesting. We live such interesting times now. How television is changing, radio is changing, podcasts have kind of evolved from radio to become on-demand audio, and that's a whole new form of entertainment itself. I don't think anyone could have considered 20 years ago. And I think the way we talk to each other, communicate, is so vital. But it's all changing, and I think we live in this world of change right now, and no one's quite sure where everything's going to land.
I think one thing that we haven't considered, just going back to the words becoming taboo thing, because it kind of goes along with what you just said right now, is that I think there's always been a phase where words have gone in and out of usage. The difference is now is that because everyone is connected by the internet and by podcasts and by whatever media that we've got nowadays, is that we've also given a platform for everybody who finds these changes wrong in some way or form. Facebook, for example, I usually use the example of Facebook for this, which is the problem with Facebook is that it's given everybody a platform, and everyone's right.
Yeah. It's the
everyone's right. No one's. If you're wrong, that's it. I will just cut you off, and that's it. No speak to you again, and I will shout you down. Not me personally, but this is what a lot of people tend to be like. And so we're in this age where we're visibly seeing words either being banned or changed or have new meaning attributed to them. Yeah. So, for example, the whole idea of a trope.
Yeah.
A trope. Now it means stereotype because people you've used that word on the internet to mean stereotype, whereas trope, the original actual word of trope, means a turn.
Okay. As
in literally, if I'm to turn round and look at my cat who just walked in right now, I have just troped to look at my cat. That's the original usage of the word. Things evolve, but words die off as well.
Yeah, words dying off. So, as you know, I've been working on my my fictional book for about 5 years now. It's now a nice, wedge of text and information. So I'm quite proud of where I've got to. Still not quite finished it yet, but J.K. Rowling took 5 years to finish Harry Potter, so it's fine.
There you go.
so in the first, I was trying to find like Victorian lexicon in the first 3 or 4 chapters. And I found all these words that were really interesting that we don't use anymore. Like, I found the term swallowking.
Swallowking.
It's just a beautiful word, swallowking. And it actually means it's when storm clouds gather together.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I was just like, that means I can find out. It feels like there's a texture to that word.
It's a bit like when I had this book of Yorkshire, which is dated from like 1906 or something like that, and it's got one word in there which from my area of Yorkshire, which was Sheffield. In the Hillsborough area, there was a term called belly timber, which I've never heard of before. So obviously, by the time I was born, back in 1980, it'd gone out of fashion by then.
Beautiful word.
But this is a term that would have been used back in 1900 something, maybe even before. Oh, I'm right hungry. I'm going to get me some belly timber.
Ooh. But no, with a lot of words, they carry the feeling of what they mean when you say them.
Yeah.
Do you think that, I suppose our evolution of using text messages, as it were, has shortened our use of words too? We now use text speak, like TET-SPK, to represent what words are, or like what is effectively become WUT on text speak. Do you think that deliberate kind of like reduction of language, it misses out on the texture of a word, it misses it out because it's not there, because it needs to be communicated in as like 160 characters or less?
I think it depends on who uses it. Because I text using full words. I never.
Me too.
I will. The only time I ever used abbreviations like or text speak is when I put lol
Yeah. Well,
or
that's a
LMAO.
phrase that's changed as well,
Yeah,
lol, because when
because
I was young, lol meant something completely different to now.
yeah,
Uh,
it meant lots of love, didn't it?
no, actually, it's
Didn't
so.
it?
Bear in mind, so all the symbols of all the those kind of symbols used to mean something. They used to be an expression, right? So
Mhm.
when I was a child, when I used to use the internet, like 1996, 1998, lol actually meant shock. Because actually, you ever seen the
Really?
front cover of Home Alone? So you've got the
Yeah.
L O L.
Macaulay Culkin doing the whole.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now have a look at your hands. You do this. That was lol.
Ah.
Yeah. That meant shock at the.
Ah. Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's what lol was. Lol used to mean shock, or surprise. Now it means lots of love or lots of laughter. So that is a word that's changed in 20 years. It was created in 20 years and it's evolved as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it depends on the person writing. So like we both said, we're both people who write with full words. I don't put THT. I put THAT for that particular word, and
Yes.
so on and so on and so on. But because I do a lot of talking with younger people who are interested in paganism, um, they do a lot of text speak as well. So there are some words I'll look at and it's like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. I'm gonna have to be this old git who actually has to look online to find out what that is. Um, so I think on one hand it's a generational thing. I think younger generations who have grown up with texting, as opposed to like you and me, we grew up without texting. We grew up with actual action figures and Tonka toys and
Hell yeah.
giving each other dead arms because that was fun back then. And
That's true.
whereas the generation below us, they've actually grown up with mobile phones and such. So for them, text speak is perhaps just a lot quicker. So even though they know the words, I think it's just a lot quicker to do text speak, and I can see the uses of it. I'm just old-fashioned on purpose because I like it like that.
What was your favourite?
Whereas if I
Oh,
really wanted to get into it, I could if I wanted to,
yeah.
but I don't because that's not how I write.
No, me neither. So you touched on paganism there. Obviously,
Yeah,
I know you through Pagan Pride, I guess, what we were part of for many years.
we
Um,
were,
we
yes.
for many years, and so interesting. So what did, that started in what 2009? I think that first festival was, wasn't it?
Um, yes. It started as 2009 as a picnic, and then 2010 was the first parade.
Yeah, festival and stuff, wasn't it? So then,
Yeah,
and we did that till like what I think I was there till like 2017, 2018, maybe.
yes, because I left a year before you did.
Yeah, I think I came to video. That was it. Um, yeah, and I just attended the last two as a kind of what's the word for it, punter customer. I personally was
Yeah.
interested in the world, but no. So what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, from Pagan Pride.
Yeah, so going into that quite in the sense that there was nothing like that before. Because I was trying to quantify with some people why did I do pagan pride? I'm not necessarily pagan. I'm more atheist, but I would actually consider myself to be atheist pagan because I observe the wheel of the year and I observe with certain
Mhm.
tenets of it. But generally, I'm not religious, so I would put myself as a kind of atheist pagan.
That's okay. That's fine.
So, and I was trying to explain to someone about why I helped and why I supported it for so long as I did, and I struggled at the time, and it took me a while to understand why I wanted to be. And I think I want my friends to succeed. I want people to be the best they can be, and I realised that was the network we had at the time. There was a core group of about what, maybe 8 to 10 of us initially, and there was an idea, and we all believed that with our part in that we could make something very special, and we did, and it achieved like worldwide
Yeah.
success, and everyone involved, no matter what their role was, whether it's something small, whether it was a volunteer on the day, to the people who were organising the bands, people who were organising all the talks, and the people who were kind of overseeing the whole festival. Everyone played a huge part, and it really was an important, I guess, not necessarily religious, but a religious icon, a religious celebration, a religious powerful celebration. But what I've learned from that is that I made a lot of friends. I communicated to a lot of different
Mm.
people. I talked to people from up and down the scale of whatever their ideas and faiths, their passions were, and I realized I became a better communicator out of that. And
Cool.
I took a lot of that away. I've
Cool.
logistically my I've become a richer person because of it. How did you find that experience? Now we've come away from it.
I right. The reason I'm thinking about this is because I have mixed feelings with pagan pride. Um, is because I live with it in a way that perhaps you and the rest of the team didn't. Because at the time, I was married to the woman who created pagan pride, and pagan pride I pretty much lived with for all of a few years. I can't remember how many years it was. Um, five, five years. I lived with that festival for 5 years, and once me and
The founder.
split, once me and Esme split, she took Pagan Pride with her, which I was very thankful to see it go. I didn't want it part of my life anymore. Um, so, on the positives, I will say that I learned to be a lot more authoritative. Because I had to make a lot of calls where, if it's because my original job of Pagan Pride was to organise the speakers and the workshops, and so I had say on who could be in and who could not, and then I would take that back to the committee and we would agree either this person would be good or that person would be bad, and I would argue a case for those people who I thought were actually pretty good. Um, and that I could actually just talk to people, that I could actually network and talk. Yeah, I think that's it. I learned how to network with people
Yeah.
because I had to even go and ask societies, like say the Nottingham Tai Chi Association or whatever it's actually called, to see if they would be interested in bringing a speaker on, or could they do a workshop for us, and they would ask me for free to actually negotiate with that. So I learned about networking and negotiation and communication, and how to speak professionally as
Yeah,
well.
that's right. Yeah, I guess that for me, it kind of like the skill set I had was really good, but it allowed me to polish a lot of that. I was able to talk myself to traders, to professionals who wanted communication on a on a basis that wasn't informal. It wanted structure, it wanted information that was clear, and that made me become a better communicator in that respect. So it just helped me with my job now. So
Yeah,
I took a lot from that. So
yeah, and I took from that networking experience when I started picking acting up again. I took that with me to talking with people in the local networking community for actors and producers and directors, which is called Nexus.
Yeah.
It was originally called Tweet Up in Nottingham, but it's now changed its name to Nexus as of last year. Still the same thing, it's just that Nexus was a more professional sounding name. That's why they changed it. So, to be fair, I've not been to many Nexuses because I've had other things to concentrate on in my life. But I learned how to talk with people, I learned how to talk with people in that terms of what needs to be said.
Yeah. Which I guess ties in quite well with the bard and the Ovate levels, doesn't it? That's how we do that. So, and all that plays into each other. That was really good. So, I'd like to run something by you, actually. A thought, as it were. It came to me a couple of days ago. And in fact, I shared a conversation with Lumi yesterday. I was at work on Monday, a Monday evening, in fact, and a colleague comes to me and she says, "Is it bank holiday today?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's the first Monday in May. It should be." Now, at this time, I was unaware that May Day has actually moved. The bank holiday had actually... I did not know. I actually thought it was a bank holiday. I was at work as normal. And then someone comes to me and says, no, the bank holiday got moved to Friday. I was like, really? When did that happen? So, and I saw the Beltane messages coming out, and I saw the celebrations coming out of, like, because obviously Beltane and May Day generally are the first it's celebrated either the first day of May or it's the first Monday in May. And then I realised, of course, bank holiday is now Friday. And the government, of course, has changed this due to certain COVID rules, and I think there's a tie-in to one of the VE celebrations for the war.
It was VE Day. That's why they did it.
But then I noticed something, because once someone said, "Oh, it's Friday," and I was like, "Oh, Friday's the first full moon of spring," and that's interesting. It's Friday now becomes the first, from an esoteric point of view, from a spiritualist point of view, under the esoteric law that you and I have both looked at. Mm-hmm. It's quite interesting that Beltane is now going to be on the first full moon. Well, if we say that May Day and Beltane are the same thing, because they sort of are, mm-hmm. That's been moved to Friday. Friday is also the first full moon of spring, as a kind of a new reset point. And then now, I wonder whether there was a purpose to put them together, or and I kind of wanted to bounce that off you. That hit me yesterday. I was like, well, that's an intriguing point of view. And when we look
I'm really, really sorry to say that the full moon's tomorrow.
Is that when it begins?
Well, it's tomorrow night going into Friday.
Okay.
So I suppose it depends which way you want to look at it. Okay. Astronomically, the full moon's tomorrow night.
Okay.
But, of course, if it's that weird stage where, of course, Earth tilt and Moon in place, it's still there on Friday in the world somewhere. Yeah, fuck it, it's full moon. But yeah, to actually put that bank holiday on the first full moon of Beltane.
Because it's like the spring re-beginning, isn't it? You know, the celebration of fire. You know, it's the burning of the old. It's the beginning of the new season.
Yep.
Spring is the new beginning, and you're seeing that kind of term in the media. You know, it's a new beginning, a new normality. You know, it's a new life, it's a new world, and you're going, that's interesting. Because, of course, now they are representing that we are in the age of Aquarius, which is the new beginning. We've now passed out of the age of Pisces, and that age is now, that eon is now passed on. We're now in a new one, and going, is this the definition of when that begins? I was like, we have essentially a new society, a new normality to the world, which is the term being used. And I was like, that seems quite all esoteric in itself.
I suppose it is. I never really thought about it, to be fair, because I just thought it got moved along to because of VE Day and because of COVID reasons. But interesting how you made that association. Yeah, that's interesting. I never really thought of it like that, and it never struck me because the way I see Beltane and all the other pagan festivals, especially the more Celtic ones, I usually count them all in new moons because this is where people differ and people fall out. It's all to do with the Coligny calendar, which was the bronze tablet found in Coligny in France, which gives us a document of how the Gauls, the Celts of France, counted their years. It also gives you accounts of how they counted their weeks and months, and they divided everything into two. So the year had a good half and a bad half, or more accurately, a light half and a dark half, summer and winter. Break it down into the months. You break them back down into two sets of 4 weeks, one for the light half, one for the dark half, i.e. one for the full moon, one for the new moon. Now, the problem is, no one knows when it actually started. Was it on the new moon? Was it on the full moon? So my argument has always been, okay, so we do know that the Celts counted in nights, not in days, which would seem to make sense that if they were to count winter before, as in the wind, because they counted it as the next day would be nightfall going on to the next day. And nightfall would be the next day onwards.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So it would make sense that, yes, the full moon's obviously easier to track because you can see it there, but you can also count the new moon as well. Not just in its dark half, but literally on that first sliver on the right-hand side. Which I think a lot of the lunar-based calendars do. They
Yeah,
count
that's
it
right.
with the new moon.
It's the first line
So,
of the silver.
yeah, so it would make sense to count it if the Celts brought the lunar calendar with them from the east, because they travelled from Central Europe to the east and migrated across to the west. That would make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
In my reckoning. So to me, it's counted with the new moon. But the way that words change over time and the way that the meanings of words change over time, so do festivals, so do religious connotations, so do meanings of things. They change over time too. And so if people want count with... because what is it recently, right? Within the past decade, maybe even a bit more, people have been counting full moons using the Native American names.
I haven't seen that actually. So do you want to explain that?
You have. You will have on Facebook. Like for example, we're entering the strawberry moon. We're entering the worm moon.
I think that's triggering
Those
a few
are,
neighbours.
Yeah. Those are Native American terms. Why are we using that? Haven't they suffered enough?
There's not many of them left. We keep making their little lands smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah.
I mean, we had our own versions. I couldn't tell you what they were. I can't. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I do know that we had our own English ones. I think both of us, as in both England and the Native American people, they both have Hunter's Moon. I think they both have that.
So I guess that would be the brightest moon of the night at which to see.
Yeah. So it would make sense for us now, because our culture is different from what it was back in the old pre-Roman times. That if we count by full moons, we count by full moons because our Saxon ancestors did. So that's where we get it from. So realistically, I guess what I'm trying to say here is, if you want to establish meaning in a full moon that's now been given on the first bank holiday, has now got the words. If you want to ascribe meaning to the full moon that has been put onto the new bank holiday of this month, of this year of 2020, I see no problem with that. In fact, you may have actually picked up on something that I have not. So who am I to say that you're wrong? I'm not saying you're wrong.
I don't know.
Not at all. I find it very interesting that you saw that and I didn't.
Yeah, I guess it's because I was not putting things together. I was just like, oh, because what clicked in my mind was when it's moved to the full moon, and I was like, well, that's I understand that not everyone, say politicians or above, should we say, follow an esoteric calendar, but there are those people in the world who, of influence, certainly do. Whether what we want to call them is a different matter, a society of secrets or whatever, or those pulling strings. They certainly follow esotericism, whether it be the Kabbalah or the Kabbals or whatever. So I found it really interesting that we've actually deliberately done that. And it could have just been the fact that we moved it due to the celebration of Veterans Day. But it was a bit like, when that in that conversation, it clicked and I was like, oh. And then, oh. It was like ding, 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 lights in the head kind of thing. Like
It was a series of thoughts that went into a place, and they all connected.
I was like, I wonder if that's why they've done it. Oh, okay. And I thought,
so are we actually in the age of Aquarius then? Well, I didn't think that was until 21 something.
Well, it's passing through the stars that lead into it. So we've passed the first star of the star of Aquarius, where the sun rises in the morning. That's the first star. Okay. So we're not fully into it, but it is interesting. I think it's like 2150 when we're truly into it. But they've been saying that this is the beginning of that, and like when it was the age of Taurus, and we saw the ending of the bull, and there's the quite symbolic...
which was the Bronze Age.
That's right,
that was the Bronze Age.
So that's symbolically represented in, I guess, historical literature as when Moses came down from Mount Sinai and broke the tablet and broke the bull, and we symbolically then drew from ram's horns, and I guess the Torah, the Jewish faith, of course, represents that at that age, and that's why that kind of still lingers today. And then we came to the area, the age of Pisces, where we see like the symbolism through Christianity of the fish replete, and then now we're in a new age, and there's almost like a shedding of the old age where the whole world tradition appears to change with the universe, really, which is fascinating in itself. How the stars make these things happen, but I guess if we are following them, whether even inside or by order, shall we say? Is this the new normality? This massive change of society. Now we have to we got contact tracking on our phone now and all that kind of stuff.
No, that is very interesting, isn't it? Because if we are approaching that new age, like you say, then is this how it manifests itself? Where our entire civilization is affected in some. I say entire civilization.
Yeah, because if you're out in the tribes of Africa or South America, you're not really going to be affected by this. No.
Because we've not heard anything of that.
No.
Because we're only focused on the Western world, and that's it.
Exactly.
There is no other world.
No. I want my new iPhone, damn it.
Yeah, mate. Yeah. But the whole Western world has actually been put into a very stationary position, and a friend of mine was asking this. Amy was asking this. Do I think everything will go back to normal when lockdown's finished? No.
No.
I don't think it will.
No.
I don't think it can.
No, I don't think it can. I mean, the COVID thing, there's a lot of issues now. We have a new virus out in the world that can affect us in a way that's invisible. It's a way that, now we have contact tracing, as they want to push out. They want everyone to have an app that basically mirror the Chinese system, where if you're within 6 feet of someone who is a yellow or red tag, as in they've had it, or they have been in contact with someone who's had it, you must now also self-isolate. And they're trying this out actually this week in the Isle of Man and the Isle of Wight, a contact trace system. They want that to be rolled out, and there's a kind of push for that to happen. And that kind of guarantees that we're going to be in a position of lockdown. And I was a bit like, that's a bit suspect. And they want us to move to a cashless system where because cash, of course, transfers money and it transfers viruses. So they want us to move to this cashless system where, in the conspiratorial circles, that would say that you now can track every piece of money in the world, and all businesses have to use a contactless system. So everything is now digital, as where cash is still probably the most powerful thing we've got as a society, that you can still buy things incognito. You can buy things off the grid, as it were. There's no tracing on money. You just pass it back and forth. And this way, it tracks every single pound being moved around. And some people are really quite afraid of that. That everything is being tracked in that regard.
Let's put it this way. If you're already using the internet, you're already being tracked.
Absolutely.
Stop scaring the hell out of yourself.
Absolutely.
And get out from your tinfoil hat, because if you're on the internet, You're already being watched. They're already
Absolutely.
onto you. So, I mean, conspiracy theory or not, um, a cashless society. There are pluses and minuses to that.
Absolutely.
Um, you know, it's going to make things. It would make things a lot more efficient. It'll make things a lot more quicker. Um, it would make it can. It'll do good for businesses and such. But the flip side of that is, like you say, there's no autonomous going out and purchasing of things. You'd have to actually be using some kind of electric form, a chip of some kind. You can't just exchange
Yeah.
currency. Um, but at the same time, would muggings stop because of that? Because what they're going to do? Give me your credit card. Yeah, okay. What's the pin? Fuck you, I'm running now. Um,
Because they want to see a merger of
yeah,
things like your driver license and your passport into
yeah,
an ID card. So it'll all be. Yeah, and then again, there's benefits to all that being
yeah.
combined.
I, a cashless society. There's things for it, there's things against it,
Absolutely, yeah.
and I don't know enough about it to actually have an opinion on it yet.
No, see,
Yet.
I'm in that. I'm in that camp too. I'm a bit too stupid to know. I'm just aware that these things, and I can see why people are bothered by it. Um, but they're not the benefits. I can see why things make sense like this. And I guess
But at
as
the same But at the same time, if people are on benefits, then surely that'll be more beneficial
official.
to have it as a cashless system. Because realistically, the only people I can see getting really hurt by having a cashless society, criminals,
Yeah.
and places where we're paying people by hand.
So where cash is available, where things can be taken out or
Yeah,
stolen. Certainly so. Be interesting to see what happens. I think we're living in really interesting times that are uh, everything's changing. And there's a new normal coming,
that's it. That's it. And
which I
for
guess
good or for ill,
yeah.
things are changing, and we don't know. We don't know. I don't think Bill Gates is in a massive, huge conspiracy to chip everybody and then download Windows into their soul or any crap like that. But
No.
it's one thing I don't agree with the whole Illuminati thing either. The whole idea that the world's being run by this secret elite, this very shadowy organization, who's been doing this since I don't know. The medieval ages. They've had this world game going from the
Well,
medieval
it's
ages
interesting we say
to
that. It's not I don't want to go into that, but like the same terms are used with those in the esoteric communities, such as the Great Plan or the Great Order. The new
I think
thing.
that means on a cosmic scale,
Oh
not on
yeah,
a physical one.
yeah. It's
In the same way, it's basically a way of saying God's plan without actually
without using
attributing
the word
it to
God. Yeah,
Christianity.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So this whole idea of this shadowy organization running the entire world, taking all the money so nobody has any, and keeping the population down to a very bare minimum for the working and for the grafting of these elite people. There's three things wrong with that. One, are you seriously telling me there's a conspiracy that's been going on for almost 1,000 years where no one's manipulated it for their own ends and greed?
Because everyone does. Everyone would.
Because everyone does. In which case, the game would just fall apart straight away. Two, so you want to kill off most of the people who you want to work for you. So how's anything going to get done? How are you
Exactly.
going to create? How are you going to create machinery? How are you going to create technology? And if you want all the money to be for the rich and not for the poor, well, who are you going to sell stuff to?
Yeah, that's it. Because someone's got to be a buyer.
Someone's got to be a buyer, and your profits and shares. It doesn't matter how much money you've got. If no one's buying, your shares are going to go down.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. I think there is this
Bye
kind
bye.
of Darwinian logistics, how companies are eating each other. Particularly when you get these now mega corporations like Amazon or whatever, they buy all these other companies up, and it's like a bit of Blade Runner, isn't it? There's no governments anymore. The world is just corporations fighting each other.
And it would be interesting if that actually happens.
Because some companies have more money than governments do. So
Yeah, yeah. I do believe that there are corporations who avoid paying taxes.
oh,
That's
absolutely.
not a conspiracy.
No.
That's just criminality, and they're getting away with it.
Yeah.
So I think they should be dealt with. Absolutely. Um, yeah, I wasn't going anywhere with that.
No, because I think what do they do? They set their office up in Ireland or in Jersey or whatever, and they go, well, we'll operate in this country and we'll avoid the tax because this is our office. Our office doesn't pay
Oh, you got
taxes.
you got Virgin, yeah, you got Virgin.
Oh,
You got
absolutely, yeah.
Branson. You got Branson suing the NHS for millions, and he has the cheek to approach the government for public bail for Virgin Atlantic.
Yeah,
Yes, I know we're talking about people's jobs. I understand that, but really,
yeah.
did you have to sue the NHS in the first place?
And he sued him because
Honestly,
Virgin Health didn't take on a number of contracts that were basically in a backhand deal were going to be given to him, which is a bit
yeah,
like, what? You're just
yeah,
saying, you are selling off the NHS. Oh yeah, well, you promised me
yeah.
in a contract that was going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, and a thought did occur to me back to when we were talking about tracking
Yeah,
people with an app to trackers. Well, there's an easy way around that.
put a bit of follower on your phone.
Well, there's that, and you just leave your phone behind.
That's it. Because
And then
how often have we seen in
go and
spy
do what you're
movies,
doing.
where you take out the tracker from the body or wherever it is and you put it on the dog, or you
Yeah,
give it to somebody else and off you go.
yeah, we've all seen this. We've all seen it. Whether it's on something like I don't know, like Joe Wick or
Yeah,
Joe Wicks.
yeah,
Not
John Wick.
Joe Wicks. Who the no
John
no
Wick.
not Joe Wicks. John Wick. Whether it's something like us on John Wick or the Bourne Supremacy or even the Simpsons. Tracker on the dog, tracker on a dog turd, whatever. It's there.
Yeah, and you
We've
just
all done it.
let
We've
it
all
go.
seen it. But in all seriousness, I think we should have been onto this stuff a lot earlier. In terms of lockdown and
So how are you finding lockdown, then?
I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
I'm completely. I am one of these people who is not hit by any kind of social anxiety. So I don't have any anxiety about not seeing other people or of seeing people. I get days like everybody else does. I can't be asked with people one day, but I'll be looking at who to call the next day.
yeah, same.
Depends on the day. I'm fine. Seriously, I've learned in lockdown that I can be one of these people who can stay away from everybody and be completely fine with it.
The only thing I'm finding about lockdown is I need to go to the barbers, dude.
Oh,
Just
mate. Have you seen that? Have you seen the protests in America?
no, I've seen some of them. I guess there's various reasons, isn't there?
Yeah.
What ones have you seen?
My favourite one has to be the guy who's shouting at the camera with his placard, going, "We want our haircuts. We've got families to feed. We got money to make, and we've got jobs." It's like, dude, you just shut yourself down by the very first thing you just said. We need our haircuts.
Yeah,
It's that important to you, my friend.
so that was at the top of the list.
Yep. Go and buy yourself some shears and give yourself a number 2. Seriously, if you're that concerned about it, go and do it.
I guess for me, I've had long hair,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, you have.
I'm a bit like, well, I'm not too bothered by it because the thing is, I kind of made a promise to myself a few years ago that when I cut my hair, I wasn't going to grow it out again. And as I've got a bit older, like you and I, we've been receding a little bit around the edges. I think there's no point in me having longer hair. It looks very silly. People with long hair at the back, but kind of a bit thin on top, do look a bit silly. So I thought, well, I'm never going to grow my hair out again. And that was the case for about 4 or 5 years. But now I'm kind of growing it out again. It feels quite comfortable,
Yeah.
but I don't think I'm going to let it grow much longer than beyond this. But I'm kind of missing going to the barbers, really.
Yeah. I'm due for another cut, but I can wait.
That's it. I can wait, sure. I just don't want to wait until next year.
Yeah. If by September and I'm start getting really, really messy, I just might have to employ number 2.
Yeah, just take it all off.
Just live with it. I mean, there's a number of ways we can look at this, isn't there? We can either learn to do it ourselves, or we can go to the extreme and just do it,
Yeah.
whether it's wrong or not, and shave it all off, or we can grow it out.
Yeah. So I don't know growing it out. I don't know why this just jumped into my head just now. So I had Richard Freeman on a few weeks ago. He's the head of the Center for Cryptozoological and Forteana um, Zoology. So basically, he travels the world looking for mythical creatures. As part of
Oh, okay.
part of like
So,
National
okay.
Geographic and so on. He's been to like Sumatra, um, Indonesia, um, what's that, Mongolia and so on, such as like the Almasty and the Tasmanian tiger and stuff. And we were talking about long hair. And it literally just popped in my head, long hair, about like why do humans have naked bodies, but obviously hair on the top. And there's the concept of the naked ape theory, which of course is at one time. So there's no aquatic apes. The apes live in every part of the world, but we don't live in water. When the one theory is, of course, is that we are an evolution of a naked ape that used to be an aquatic ape. Um, and the reason we grow hair is that our young would hold on to the hair as he walked through shallow water.
Okay.
Yeah. That came to mind just like randomly. It's just like, oh, that's how we would get
Interesting.
around.
Yeah.
And then he said, and then we were talking about it. And he quickly shot it down and says, "Well, yeah, but if we were hunting in water and we were naked, there's alligators, hippos in the water, they'd have eaten us." Is that,
Yeah.
yeah, probably right.
Yeah.
There's plenty of things under the water that certainly would have been a slightly higher alpha protocol than we are.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I don't know. I reckon. I don't know. I was going to say something like, I reckon at some point our long distant ancestor um, started thinking laterally and started able to be using tools, and whether or not we started wearing skins as a kind of, I've killed this thing. Look at me. This is how
Like a
powerful I
boast.
am. Let me wear it. I've become the bear, I become the wolf or whatever else. And maybe from there we became more naked because we started, in that way where people developed an overbite
Yeah,
because we started using forks.
yeah,
And so when we're biting forward,
yeah.
don't do that. That hurts. Is it a bit like that? Because you still get some people that are quite hairy. Obviously, not hairy enough to survive in the wilds by themselves, but you still get
I know.
quite.
There's a guy at work, dude.
You have to
It's like
question it
it's like a
sometimes. Yeah.
bear.
But yeah, I would. I don't know. I don't know. I reckon that we had it for some reason that we can't think of just yet, or maybe we just haven't come upon the reason of what species of hominid, of why we were
Yeah.
so naked. But it seems the most logical explanation to me that we probably clothed ourselves and then started becoming more naked as time went on.
Yeah, I thought that. So that's kind of my thought, is that as we perhaps were wearing the skin of that, and we didn't need to grow hair because now we have some artificial, or animal skin on,
Yeah,
or we're wearing a cover that keeps us warm,
yeah,
so our hair didn't grow as much and didn't need to in the next generation and so on.
yeah. Or perhaps our hominid species type evolved from around the time when, or maybe we became more naked the more that the world became warmer.
Yeah, I would say that seems to
So,
tie into it quite well.
I say, again, I don't know. Until I've got my TARDIS, I don't know. But as soon as I've
TARDIS,
got it,
so
I'll let you know.
I saw you cosplaying as the Doctor a few times.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
So okay, so it's the Doctor Who then. Who's your favourite Doctor?
You can't ask that, Christian. It's like saying who's your favourite child. Um, okay, it's a combination because they're all good for very different reasons. But my absolute favourite, if I should really narrow it down, my absolute favourite has to be David Tennant. So number 10.
Is he number 10 now? He's not 556 or something.
No, he's number 10.
Let's retcon that history now. New series says that didn't happen.
We know. But they've always retconned the history. That's the thing. Even shows like Star Trek have always retconned their history and never been consistent. And it's the same with Doctor Who. It's not consistent.
Can rewrite your own
Writing
canon.
will always do something different, won't it? But no, he's my favourite. Although the Doctor that I was watching when I was a kid, that was Sylvester McCoy, so I quite enjoyed him. But the Doctor that actually got me into Doctor Who was Paul McGann's.
Same here.
So number 8. But at the same time, I love number 9 for his childlike nature with his childlike nature with seriousness and this tragedy of coming out of the Time War. 11 for me was meh, I'm afraid to say. Matt Smith is a great actor, he really is, but I just couldn't gel with his Doctor. Sorry. He did a good job, but
yeah, I think some of the stories struggled.
Love.
And
Yeah.
I guess it was one of them ones where the whole series was the arc of the story. And a lot of that felt very timey-wimey. It felt a bit loose cannon. Didn't feel like the story was going anywhere sometimes. But there were moments when he was absolutely on point with the way that he acted and performed, and there was such power. And and you go, wow.
Yeah, like in when a good man goes to war. That was a brilliant example of his acting and how his Doctor works and how he's prepared to literally call all together an entire army if he has to. But even then, at the very last minute, being the Doctor,
didn't do it.
Can't do it. But that's the Doctor, isn't it?
Yeah.
He can't do it. He's the man who can't do it, because he's the man who won't do it. Until he was the one who did at the end of the Time War, because he had to, because reality was tearing itself apart, and he could either carry on doing what he was normally doing and become part of that which got torn apart, or he could stop it right now. The cost being his own people. 12, I liked 12. I liked 12 a lot. I loved 12 in these very last series because I thought, yeah, here we are. We've got Capaldi and his acting and the actual stories that this Doctor
he
needs.
felt it took a while to get comfortable with his stories. And there was lots of moments where he's just like, this guy's not quite sure who he is. I think that was intentional. And then he becomes this quite confident in his ability. And he was, particularly when he became the rock star version. He had his guitar. I love that. He's finally got his own personality.
I did as well. I even love the Sonic. I even love the Sonic sunglasses. I thought they were great.
Me too. That was good.
I thought they were great. And I've always said it a little. I'll get on to 13, then I'll tell you what I said about the Doctor. And 13, I like 13. It's just the writing that pisses me off.
I think that's a big issue, isn't it? I think clearly all the other actors were Doctor Who fans as well. Certainly Peter Davidson said he grew up watching William Hartnell, and since then David Tennant talks about it, Pat Smith talks about it, and Jenny Winniker's like, no, I never saw Doctor Who before. And I think I think when people realise that, was a bit of an ouch.
Yeah, it's like with I don't know what it is. I couldn't even tell you what it was. It's just that it's almost like they're just about to get to some really, really, really good point, and then they make a choice which leaves you feeling a bit deflated. There's some wonderful moments in 13's history so far, and 13's. I think she's brilliant. I really do. I think she's got the energy. I think she's got the enthusiasm. I think she's got the chops to be the Doctor. But there are just some things that, when you listen to the dialogue, you think, no, that doesn't. Oh dear. And her Doctor works best when she's being her most compassionate, and when she's being her most generous, as well. Like, for example, when Jodie Whittaker started doing all these little videos about her being a doctor and telling us, right, yep, I'm on the run from this alien race. I've got trapped on Earth. Everything's on lockdown. And she's telling her body, you've got this. You can hold on. You can get onto that.
Well, that's
and she does that brilliantly. She does that fantastically. And I'm glad somebody else put it in the comments. This guy put, I'm 42. I've just watched this. And now I've got tears in my eyes. And I'm so glad you put that, mate, because that was brilliant.
See, some things like that should be wrote into the story in a way. You know, there's been many periods of time where he's stuck on a planet, and it's been 20 or 100 or even 600 years in a certain story form again, where he's stuck on a planet as somebody. And if there's no reason why, the lockdown can't be wrote into a story, you know, like, and therefore those little clips make sense so that she's trying to survive while stuck here in lockdown in a house. She can't escape. There's a virus outside. It could be an alien virus, but that makes a contextual sense that people can feel the real world reality of, the Doctor Who is really happening here because I've experienced that myself. You know, I'd like them to do that.
Yeah, I reckon hopefully they will. Hopefully they will. So how I've kind of put all this together in terms of all the recent Doctors is 9 is recovering from the time warp, and he's psychologically dealing with all the tragedy and the anger and the pain of that, the losing of Gallifrey, the losing of his people, the sacrifice he had to make. He's living with that right now. 10 is the anger of that. You know, he will do everything he can to save everyone. He'll do everything he can to stop evil in whatever form it comes, and because he needs someone to hold him back, he's in danger of becoming the thing he actually fears, which is what his own species became. Which they're exploring with a series called the Time Lord Victorious, and I'll be very interested to listen to that. 11, he's come out of that and he's learned from those mistakes, but he's trying to keep his friends together. 12 has now entered a midlife crisis, hence the whole guitar playing and going on. And 13 is in almost reluctance, in that way of everything's fine, everything's good, yep, we're all good, we're all chipper. And then when no one's looking, she's all thinking very dark thoughts.
Because there are moments of dark thoughts in there. I don't know whether they're intentionally wrote into the story or not. She almost seems to not really care about her companions. There's a particular episode where they fight out of an alien sensor or something. I think Yaz turns around to the Doctor and says, "Well, I'm going to go back in there. There's something I forgot." And the Doctor's like, "Yeah, okay." And it's like, you've just 20 minutes to fly out of this building together.
This is what I mean. This is what I mean by the writing. It's like the Doctor wouldn't do that. Or at least there's not been enough in that particular story thread where the Doctor's trusting Yaz 100% completely to go off on her own to go and get something.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's the intention, that's not what came across. What came across is what you just said. It's like, what, you're just going to go and let her do something and now something terrible is going to happen.
Have you watched the new series of Lost in Space?
No.
Because that suffers with that a lot. It's really beautiful, well done. It's really well directed. It looks very visually outstanding. It's on Netflix. But every situation the crew finds themselves in a moment of peril is caused by them making a silly decision that nobody with a logical mind would make. And it's that now for 2 seasons. It's like, come on.
Now, interestingly enough, I used to watch the original Lost in Space because when I go around to my nan's place, and if my mum and dad went out somewhere, for example, we'd watch it on a Sunday morning because it was on, and it kind of scared me a little bit. But I've never been interested in the film. I saw the film with Matt LeBlanc in it quite a few years ago. Back in the early 2000s, I think.
Yeah, so what was it, about 2003, 4 maybe?
Yeah. I think I watched it in 2012 or something like that. and it was all right. It was entertaining. It was funny, but I've never really been attracted by it. To be fair, it's like Planet of the Apes. Never really attracted by that either.
I did
I
actually
love the
like.
Tim Burton film.
Yeah.
They've been great.
Yes.
They've been fantastic. But the new series, no, sorry, hasn't got me.
No. When you mentioned Tim Burton there, so I read recently they're going to redo Beetlejuice with Michael Keaton.
I heard something about that. They're going to do it as a series.
Yeah, Michael Keaton returning to the role with Tim Burton directing, and I was like, oh, well, that sounds
That would be
interesting.
cool. That would be cool.
Because what
I'd love to know I'd love to know what they're going to do with that. Would they go into a lot more detail with it? Maybe. Yeah, that'd be interesting. I'm all for that.
Yeah, I
Actually.
mean, too. I was like, I guess when you find it's the original actor and a director, so the visual storytelling will be the same. So it feels like a continuation of. And obviously now there's like the new Ghostbusters coming out, which is directed by the original director's son, because he really
Yes. Jason, is it Jason Reitman?
Jason Reitman, yeah. So he wants to take
Jason
the
Reitman,
feeling
yeah.
that there was before, and I was like,
Ghostbusters
yes.
Afterlife. I am totally with that shit.
Absolutely.
I'm loving it. I actually feel bad for Ghostbusters Answer the Call, or as I like to call it, Ghostbusters 2016.
Yeah. You feel
Because I do, because I feel it got a lot of flack that it didn't really deserve. Because it was actually, it wasn't that bad. I went in, watched it. I quite enjoyed it. I would say that it didn't suffer from having an all-female cast, not at all. The only thing I think it suffered from was there was too many calling backs to the original.
So it wasn't enough of its own film.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. It didn't stand on its own two legs. It didn't have its. There's a difference between having a nod and a salute, and then relying on your nostalgia.
Yeah.
So I think it's great to have a couple of nods here and there. So Egon's statue in the university, the fact that you got cameos from the original cast here and there, brilliant. I enjoyed that, but a lot of it was like, oh right, okay, so this is their version of the library scene. This is their version of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I thought, hang on a minute,
Didn't need
when
to
are we
happen.
going to start? Yeah. When you and what happens with a ghost once you've got them? Because the guys worked out you could trap them. Have we not got to that bit yet?
Yeah.
No. Did they? Is it that? No, they did trap them. They just didn't have any way to contain them. Is that
It
right?
was something like that, yeah.
Something like that. But no, it didn't stand on its own two legs in that regard for me. But apart from that, I liked it. I thought it was actually just a fun film. Yes, it was part of the Ghostbusters brand, but in a parallel universe. That's how I view it. Because if it was a continuation, if it was an actual sequel, there would have been references to Venkman, Stantz, Spengler, the original fire station. You know, hey everybody, do you remember what happened back in 1989?
Yeah.
When Vigo, the destroyer, came back and New York was full of ooze.
It's the Vigo.
And this, yeah. Yes, master, command me. Oh, lightning bolts in my face. I think somebody said it right. There was a fan who actually said it right on YouTube when he commented. I assume it's a he. It could be a she. But let's face it, most of the people crying by it were male. So he said there already was a bad Ghostbusters movie. It was Ghostbusters 2. And I think, to be fair, yeah. Because I remember watching the original
first, I think, as a kid.
Interesting. A bit like with me and Gremlins. I only saw Gremlins 2 first, then watched the first one. But Ghostbusters 2, I remember when that came out, because I was already a fan of Ghostbusters by that point. I know I got all the action figures from the real Ghostbusters and all of that. And then when Ghostbusters 2 came out, it was like, oh, okay, that just wasn't as good. But that was me as a kid, and I've not seen Ghostbusters 2 since. And to be fair, I should give it a second shot.
Yeah,
I should give it another go.
I think overall I've probably watched them equally number of times over the years, But yeah, I'm sure as a kid I must have saw two first.
Yeah.
Because I have more memories of watching two. I absolutely love one. The comedic timing.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
one thing I do
One
love.
is.
What
Oh,
reminds me
go on.
is that when I watched Men in Black, the first one, I
Yeah,
thought that this was a '90s take on Ghostbusters. You've got a guy
I am with you
who,
there.
who's
I am
you know
totally with you there. Yeah.
it's a guy acting completely straight, and then you got a guy who's just coming into this who doesn't know anything, and he's doing his adventure. And there's a big alien who can take over the world, and it felt like they were trying to make a new Ghostbuster in the kind of sense to fit the same genre, not necessarily a new version of it, but it kind of fits that same kind of flavor. And I think I really enjoyed Men in Black just because of that. When I was because that came out when I was like a late about 20. And like with Ghostbusters 1, the original, it's like what felt more tangible about that movie is they were all amateurs. I had no idea what they were doing, and they stumbled into this, and now shit, they're fighting a god, and there was still like kind of like guys who clearly they had no real idea what they were doing. We haven't tested this stuff properly, and here we got
Yeah.
a job for it. And the one thing when I watched the 2016 movie, they went from being people who have not had anything, and by three-quarters of the way in the movie, they were doing rolls and dances and jumping in the air. And they're like, you're acting, they're like super professionals, like stunt people doing this. And that really took me out of the 2016 movie. As we,
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. So when it becomes a little bit
like an action movie.
more, say it again. Sorry.
When it becomes more like an action movie, it kind of felt like it's now bubbles by the numbers, and I was like, that really took me out of it a lot. As in the original, even wait until the very last scene, they're still struggling with what they're comprehending.
I think, to be fair, that's a problem with a lot of comedies nowadays. It's all about, like, say, bubble points, bubble numbers. It's all about that. It's like, right, you've got to have this kind of scene. Let's have the dancing scene. Let's have the jumping up scene.
Yeah.
Let's do the Matrix thing because no one's seen that before. Shit. Yeah. I think that's a problem with Hollywood, where they become too lazy. They're playing it so safe that almost every single comedy film is doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah,
So with Ghostbusters, the first one, it's a masterpiece. Like you say, you've got this bunch of guys who don't know what they're doing, getting together and start basically becoming pest control for ghosts, and then making a business because of that, and you've got Ray at the top of the building saying that we're from representing the state and city of New York. We ask you to please conveniently move to a next parallel dimension.
it.
Fucking brilliant. It's those things. It's like, what do you say to a god? Fuck it, might as well just pull the law on her and
When
hope
someone
that
asks
works.
if you're a god, say yes.
Yeah.
It's so quotable.
But I think that's one of the weaknesses of Ghostbusters 2016. There was no real writing like that. There was no moment like that, because what makes Ghostbusters the original is the way that it's just so sharp, and the way it's just so ordinary at the same time.
Yeah.
So you had Bill Murray being Bill Murray, basically,
Yeah.
and then you had an almost realism of that, as in a realism of that world.
Yeah, because they're acting straight in the kind of way that we rib on each other. Yeah, in real life.
Whereas even though Holtzman in 2016, she's a great character. She's funny. She's, I forget the actress's name. Kate McKinnon?
Yeah.
Kate McKinnon. She's amazing. She's brilliant. She's a complete cartoon.
Yeah.
Her character's just a cartoon. As is
Melissa McCarthy, isn't it?
Abby. Is that who she played?
Yeah.
Melissa, actually, I love the dynamic between Melissa McCarthy and oh Christ, I can't remember the.
Because it kind of feels like that, because they were the team that did Bridesmaids, and it kind of felt like it was Bridesmaids cosplaying Ghostbusters. those very characters in that show, just cosplaying them, and that really bugged me as well. I was almost surprised that Ghostbusters wasn't rebooted by the likes of like Seth Rogen and Seth MacFarlane. I expected them guys to do their own Ghostbusters. They probably have attempted to.
I reckon it would have perhaps been worse.
Yeah.
Because they would have made it too much like the original, and they would have made it a lot more sexual.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of humour they have. Seth MacFarlane's great in terms of doing his impressions, and some of the jokes that him and his writing team for Family Guy and American Dad, some of it's like, oh, fuck, man, that's just, whoa, that's harsh. That's why it's so funny. But did you ever watch Seth MacFarlane's Cavalcade of Fun or something like that?
No, I didn't.
It was basically, you know the little bits in between Family Guy?
Yeah.
It's basically
Those...
a whole cartoon series of those little bits in between. So, like, sex with George Takei, with ooh.
Oh, so it's almost like probably things that were on the cutting room floor we just spliced together.
Yeah, basically. I think if Seth MacFarlane, Seth Rogen had come together and made their own version of Ghostbusters, all of that, it would have been worse, because not only have you got all these personalities going, but I'm the funniest. Yeah, but I'm the funniest with a dirty mouth. I'm the funniest with a sexist joke. And so on and so on. It would have become a parody of its own self. Whereas what really made Ghostbusters work is the fact that you just got your straight guys, and none of them. And this is the one thing that really bugs me about the flack that the girls got for the Ghostbusters 2016. Everyone's going, yeah, but they're all ugly, they're all fair. Yeah, because Dan Aykroyd was ripped, and Harold Ramis was pulling up weights like Christopher Hemsworth.
You actually bring up a really interesting point there. Nowadays, it's about you have to be a straight guy, you have to be beautiful, you have to be handsome, overly maked up, chiseled body to be a superhero or be a main star. When actually, what worked is they weren't that.
That's it. This is what I mean by saying that, as well as the sharpness of the humour and the writing, there was this very ordinary thing about it, because these were ordinary people. Ordinary people don't go around somehow smuggling nuclear reactors onto your back and shooting at shit. But give you half a chance, it would.
Suck your guts in, guys, with the Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
There must be some cockroach. Bite your head off, man. But yeah, to me, that's what makes the ordinary thing. Because you look at them all, and they're not Hollywood stars. It's like that. What's that YouTube channel called where they make honest trailers? For Ghostbusters. And there's the voiceover guy. He says, "That's right, kids. This is what actors looked like back in the 1980s." And it's, they were just ordinary guys. That's the thing. Whereas on Saturday Night Live, they all did their thing independent. They all did their thing independently. They worked. Dan Aykroyd and
Harold Ramis,
Bill Murray worked together quite often. In fact, they made Ghostbusters as a time traveling thing. That was the original joke. But they brought in the straight guys, Harold Ramis and.
It would have been Eddie Murphy, wouldn't it? But of course,
it would have been Eddie Murphy. It would have been, but it wasn't. Ernie Hudson.
I think he's a guy who I think he's a great actor, and he's a really honest, down to earth guy. It works better because it's him. Because I think it would have become the Eddie Murphy movie had he been originally in it.
And so when I was growing up as a kid, and I'm pretty sure you had the same thing, which is growing up as a kid, I wanted to be Peter Venkman because he was funny and because he was wisecracking. But the older I've got, and last time I watched Ghostbusters, I want to be Winston. Winston's chill, he's laid back, he just wants to get paid. It's just that wonderful bit where he's getting a job interview with Janine, and she's saying to him, almost like she doesn't even care, do you believe in the UFOs, the Loch Ness Monster, the Bigfoot, lady? If there's a steady paycheck, I'm prepared to believe whatever you say. Yeah. I love it.
It's true.
Absolutely love it.
Oh mate, I think Janine might have been my first crush actually.
The cartoon Janine.
Yeah, yeah, the
Yeah,
cartoon Janine.
yeah. Before they destroyed her. Yeah.
No, crush is probably is an over term. I think I always thought she was a smarter character, and I liked the fact that she seemed sassy, quite
Yeah.
headstrong,
Yeah.
and she wasn't because women of that age were damsels in distress generally in movies, and
That's right.
even in comics, sorry, not just in comics, in cartoons that was always the case. You had Janine who was a receptionist, who actually sometimes put on a proton pack herself. And sometimes I took control of the team, and I liked that. You know,
Oh no, she was full of sass.
Yeah.
She was sassy and snarky, and she was amazing for it. Like she even grabbed Slimer, and then to get her own back in the boy, she sent Slimer on a mission to go and empty the fridge.
Yeah.
Knowing that they get back starving, it's like, well, you know, kind of like, okay, fuck you, Slimer.
The food.
There you go, be a good boy. But yeah. The cartoon version of Janine, big 80s shock hair, the sharp glasses,
Yeah.
mini skirts. Yeah, I fancied that,
Yeah.
definitely. And it's interesting because they destroyed her character later on as the series progressed, and it got worse. There was a guy I used to follow on YouTube who used to do all these shows about Ghostbusters, and he just displayed the deterioration of the series, and how Janine was written from being this sassy and snarky, strong, independent woman character. They made her. They watered her down. The production company that took over, they wanted it to become more motherly. They wanted her to have round glasses. They gave her the bob haircut rather than the 80s shot because they thought sharp lines were scary for kids.
Oh man, that's terrible.
Yeah. And at some point, Slimer took over. It became Slimer and the real Ghostbusters.
That's right, it did. Yes, it did. Like in the last couple of series. Now, actually, I bought them on DVD like quite some years ago.
Yeah.
Again, sticking on Ghostbusters, I guess what really impressed me is that opening maybe the first 8 episodes, where it was so sharply written and so well.
Yeah.
You'd thinking this is the movie quality of writing. And then you look at the credits and you realise it's J. Michael Straczynski, who obviously wrote Babylon 5, writes Marvel.
That's right.
Yeah, he knew his stuff, and he really was like, I want to make this the show. And then, of course, the movie is wrote into the show as that they are the real Ghostbusters, and the movie is a movie about them. So the movie we saw in the real world is actually the movie version of the cartoon, that they're the real ones. I love that.
because he wrote the episode where a newspaper reporter came round and interviewed them. What actually happened? What
was the movie like?
What was the movie really about? And you actually saw the end of the movie.
Yes.
They came back and they got all the original overalls absolutely covered in Stay Puft Marshmallow stuff, and
there's the sequel, isn't it, where they become...
Then they say, "Oh right, the new uniforms have arrived. Great, we can get rid of these ones." And Egon looks at the actual containment unit, which is the small box thing, and he goes, "You know what? I've actually been thinking about this. We need to make it bigger. And of course, it explains why the cartoon one's so much bigger than it is in the film.
Yeah,
and this YouTube guy whose name I can't remember. But in his head, that's official canon. That's actually how it happened.
I think if it was, that's how you... Because I thought, when did the cartoon start? What, 87, 88?
The cartoon started about 86.
Okay. So it's obviously after the film, but it's obviously retconned the other way around. And that's such smart writing for that time, because you wouldn't find that necessarily a kid's cartoon at that age, because it's generally just the goodies versus the baddies. And all those kind of... So it stood out as being very different. I mean, growing up, that's why the cartoon of Ghostbusters still stands up today. Certainly those earlier episodes, because the writing's so good. And there's the episode where it's actually a sequel to the first movie where, like you said, they've got the marshmallow stuff on them, and then those suits then become copies of themselves.
Yes, because the ectoplasm somehow takes over, and... they have to fight themselves, basically. Yes, that's what happened.
Yeah, that was so good, such good ways. So ghosts, then, dude. So I guess as we're talking about ghosts,
Ghosts. Oh, I like what you did there.
well, I was gonna think, where are we gonna go with this? Fucking ghosts, ghost works. So, dude, have you seen any ghost hunting shows lately?
No,
That's a good thing because they're fucking
but
awful.
I've been making one.
I do make the effort to try and watch at least 3 episodes of every new ghost show that appears, and they all follow this same formula now, which is they'll go to a place location. Sometimes they're not supposed to be there, and it'll be this montage of clips and stuff and horror set images, panning camera shots, spooky images of like trees or whatever, and then they'll do a basic investigation. One will get scared, or they'll set up some tech, walk away. And at the end of the episode, they're going, yes, we guarantee this place is haunted. We got this. And it's like, come on, that's not how you investigate anything. And then I've always had this bugbear that hunting ghosts is nothing like that. And an investigation could take weeks, even months, of a real location. Like, say, like the Enfield Poltergeist or something. Yeah, that took about 6 years. And you're thinking, well, are we really just trying to mirror Most Haunted in their own way? Is that what's happened to ghost hunting shows? Because
I guess.
I mean, tell me about this show that you're working on, then, man. So what's
Okay. Well, everything is on hold because everything is. But we started recording in January.
Okay.
In January, it's called Haunted. And the idea of Haunted is we've only done one episode so far, and it's actually the idea of a friend of mine called Craig Gallimore, and he just wanted to know if I'd be interested in joining in and just doing something. So we thought, okay, let's give it a crack and see what we can do. So we went to a woodland in Derbyshire. I think it's Shiny Cliff Woods,
Okay.
something with an S. And there's an old house in there, in that woods. The woods itself is what's haunted, not the house that's in there. The house itself was built for a very rich man who he wanted this house built so he could send his daughters to live there, while his son, who was getting married, could inherit his house.
Okay.
But the daughters turned around and said, no, we're not going anywhere.
We're not doing that.
So they just had this house, and it was used for a while, but then it went derelict, and it's abandoned and stuff. So I went there one cold night in January, before my hernia operation, so I couldn't walk very, very fast at the time. And there was already frost on the ground anyway, so couldn't walk fast at all. And we went past this building area and went onto the actual ground where the house stands now. We're just going to do a little bit of a shot on the house just to give us some atmosphere and stuff. And then we got told within 5 seconds of just setting up and putting lights on, "Oi! You're not supposed to be there. Get down!" So we had to go into the woods instead. So we went into the woods, and apparently there was a woman who died there looking for her child, or at least she's thought to be looking for her child. She apparently is this lonely, ghostly lady that screams. We heard no screams, but we found this old farmhouse which was broken down and run down and not really much of a problem, unless you go climbing in it. And we had these glowing cat balls. And the idea...
The trigger objects, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the idea being that these balls only light up when there's movement. Touching them or moving them in some way or form. So we tried all kinds of things. Oh, this is all on camera. We did it all live. Put it on there, and we blew onto it. Nothing. Nudged it. It lit up. So it was definitely by contact. It works. Anyway, we're talking and just inviting whatever spirits are there to come forward and make their presence known. And then all of a sudden, these balls start lighting up, like it's Christmas.
Spooky.
That's it. That's the extent of our video.
So is this where you guys like packed up and ran off? What happened?
No, we tried to get it to happen again. So we had a voice box. We had a voice box which Craig had got, and I was also recording by. He was recording everything on his phone visually. I was recording everything verbally on my audio, just in case we got any
Electronic voice
EVP.
phenomenon, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No EVP. Nothing on the voice box. Just these two balls of light, as in these two cat balls, where you press them, they light up. That was it. Whether that's actually some kind of atmospheric thing in the air, like temperature or whatever, I don't know. I don't know. But the idea of haunted is to actually go to these places which are supposedly haunted on location and go and see what happens. Even if we record nothing like that night, or nothing at all.
Because that is the one thing that bugs me about some shows, that they're not willing to say that nothing's happened.
Yeah, but we are. That's the difference. We're prepared to go into a haunted place and spend the night there, going around cameras, recording anything. Whatever we find, that's what happens.
No,
So there's no special
point to do
effects. There's no jokes.
It's quite an honest, and that's honest hauntings might make more of a term, because like you do find these shows that it emphasised from being the occasional ghost or a spook, and then it became like there's someone here, then it was someone malevolent, then it was someone who is a demon, and it's like, come on, we've got to this point now. A very movie like it has to be the most dramatic thing ever. And I was listening to so I was watching a UK based. No, sorry, my apologies. No, I think it's called Ghost Seekers, and I could be wrong because they've got interchangeable names. And they went to a house in Skegness. And this is it's only aired about a month ago. And in this house, it was a Romani couple. They were very. I say that because they're very very gypsy-like in their appearance, and they claimed that this house is where the devil lives. Satan's here, right? So
In Skegness.
in Skegness. So in Skeg Vegas is where the devil lives, and that was the conclusion of these experts who were paranormal investigators. This man and wife couple, and their camera team, and they spent the night in this house. And at the end, where they show the evidence to this gypsy couple, that I think it was a mother and a daughter who lived in this house together, and they were like, "Yes, this is definitely the devil. This is what he said on the EVP, and he says his name's Lucifer." And it's like, you have just to what potentially is two spiritually minded people who thought their house was haunted. You've now told them that the greatest evil the universe has ever known lives in your house in Skeggy. See you later, guys. Thanks for your episode. And I was like, what is the psychological damage that you might have actually done to this family? It's atrocious.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing we don't want to do. That was our one and only episode, because after that I had my operation and couldn't move around very much.
So what happened with the operation? What happened? You said it was a hernia. What?
Oh, I had a hernia. I had a hernia in my groin.
Man, that's not good.
So I couldn't walk very fast, and I couldn't carry anything. I couldn't lift anything. So I had my operation. Everything is all sorted now, and 13 weeks of recovery. Ironically, I went back to work for all of 10 days on my 6th week of recovery, which is about right. And then lockdown happened. So I've had all this time to recover.
I suppose in many ways that's a bit of a bonus recovery. I guess you can then back to 100%. Because some people are going to work far too early. Because some people's recovery times for various things is usually longer. Like, even a leg, if you broke your leg, you broke your arm. 6 weeks is a good shot, but then it's still stiff afterwards. It takes still a while to recover. Your muscles are still trying to react to where this thing now is. 12 weeks maybe. So actually, you're now in a much better position. So
very much so.
How's your health now, though? Are you all glowing and everything's good?
Well, I've lost a lot of upper body strength, and I've lost a lot of my... because before all this, I was actually doing HIIT exercises.
Okay.
I had to stop that, so I've lost whatever fitness I've gained from that, and I'm introducing myself into very basic exercises again, just to get myself back in being active. But I'm weeding in the garden a lot,
Oh man,
or
so
doing living. Yeah, yeah. So a lot of practical fitness. So that's what's developing at the
no, I
minute.
suppose again, gardening. Upper body strength, core is it's good there. That'll
Yeah,
also. I've lost a little bit of weight, not quite where I used to
good
be
man.
one time, but I haven't come out of work unfortunately due to lockdown. I've been at work nearly every day.
No, of course you're a key worker because you work with food.
I'm a social. I'm the warehouse manager of Asda now, so the section leader, as Asda calls them. So I've been there nearly every day. But I've had team members who've obviously gone into lockdown because of their age. So I now have an even smaller team, but we still have the same amount of deliveries, if not bigger, than they used to be.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're there till God knows when the deliveries come. Just getting stuff on the shelf. It's crazy. You'll not. I have to describe something to you because people in the real world don't understand what happens with a delivery, okay? So you have maybe
Shoot.
26 pallets on the back of a HGV wagon, and we
Mhm.
have these double-decker wagons as well, which basically is like a double-decker bus. So it's as long at the top as it is at the bottom, so you have two levels. And there was one delivery that came with 28 pallets of toilet roll. And I've never seen that amount of toilet in my life, Yes, the entire bottom deck had some food at the back, but there was like all along the top, so all 26 pallets, two at the bottom, all toilet roll, and that is a bizarre sight to ever see. And you've got it lined up in your warehouse, and you're going, "What is all this?"
Incredible. So there's more toilet roll now than there was on a normal delivery.
Yeah, yeah. So
Wow.
that happened about a month ago, but yeah, that was just I'd never seen a sight like that before. So that's toilet roll as far as the eye could see in my warehouse, one into the other, just toilet roll. And going, did people really buy that much and hoard it?
Now you've always painted a very interesting painting of your customers.
It's
Um,
true.
so has there been a change in the customer's mentality?
No.
No, no.
So actually, no. Yes and no to that. So customers I found now are most people generally will respect the 2 meter boundary. Generally, most will
Mhm.
stay away from each other. What that has caused is that people don't talk to each other. People don't even say hello to each other in the street when they walk past each other, or even make eye contact anymore. And that's the same in supermarkets, where generally you'd come in and everyone engages in this kind of zombie-like behaviour. Everyone moves at a slow, strange pace, walks on the shop, collects their stuff. But now there's even less interaction because there's now less people in the building. I think we're allowed about 150 people in at any one time.
Mm.
But people are generally ruder. They're much sharper to their problem of what it is, as they have less patience. And I think that's because they've been queuing up for an hour. They're trying to go around. Everything seems restricted, and then here they are trying to get an answer to something, and it's like, for God's sake. And then you can tell that's the mental place that they're in. They're in this kind of like, for God's sake, I want to get out of here. Just give me what I want. So the people's patience when it comes to talking to them is very different. Most people are generally okay, but the etiquette has gone with people because their patience has gone.
Interesting. Interesting, because I found that when I'm doing my walks, when I go walking up the Bulwell Forest from where the golf course is,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
generally find if
I go up there quite often actually.
uh, um, I find that if I come into proximity with someone and we make eye contact, we'll say hello. I find that happens a lot. Um, when I was on my way to the post office today, I said hello to an old lady who was walking dogs. Got completely blanked by the postman who I was just walking by, not next to, but like I was crossing the road and he was carrying on that way. I went, morning, nothing. Oh, okay, all right, cheers, thanks, mate. But when you get into a supermarket, it's almost like everyone's mind's just gone. Like,
People can become vacant. There's nothing going on.
yeah, yeah. When lockdown was in its first couple of weeks, I would go to the Tesco in Bulwell to go and grab a few bits and pieces. And queuing up, I've got no problem with queuing up. It's British, it's what we do. But going inside, people were just lost. And every now and then I'd bump into somebody, well, not literally, but I would come across somebody who would say, "Oh, thank you, sorry, sorry," and so on and so forth. But there's a hell of a lot of people that don't.
Yeah,
And if anything, I would say that people are a lot more talkative now than they were. But it's still interesting how the ones that stand out are the ones that are rude, I think.
yeah. I mean, every it used to be almost every day I'd have a funny story about a customer, just because they had
Yeah,
at least one every day, and I haven't had any for ages. But in many ways, I guess because I'm working in a warehouse predominantly now, I don't have that customer interaction too much. Um, but no, I don't have them as much. I mean, I observe stuff like on the way home, on the way back, or walking through ball or whatever, and you do see some quirky stuff. But it got to a certain point where there was, I think it was Daniel, who obviously we share a mutual friend, and it was like, I can't believe this much stuff happens to you. And it's like, no, it's not happened to me. I just happen to see it. And I realised perhaps is that I must see an awful lot. And it's like, shit, do people not believe me anymore? So I actually stopped posting stuff like that. And only when the funniest ones stand out, I started doing that more. But no, I don't see any as much anymore. It's quite disappointing, actually. I've had I mean, you've probably had like when you've been working in customer service, your customers will ask you sometimes the most daftest of questions, and
oh yeah,
they have. I don't know whether they just have no idea, in general, about anything. Is there, or whether they're specifically that stupid? Because you do wonder.
yeah. Whenever a customer, because I'm not working at the minute. My work is in the building trade, but our company's just started opening up various stores to be collection hubs for builders and traders only.
Got you.
So a builder or a trader will order something on the website and they'll deliver it out to them. But what the company's found is that a lot of the builders and traders want to pick it up from store because it's easier. So the bigger stores, not my one, mine's a small one, but the bigger stores have been opened up to limited times so that builders and traders can get their materials delivered from that. They can pick it up from that store,
Gotcha.
but it's not open to they're not open to the public. Open to the public. But when I was working on a normal basis, um, whenever a customer always asks me the question of, this might sound like a daft question, but
But
yeah, I don't. I'm fine with that,
me
and I
too.
always I
That's normal.
encourage them. I say, oh no, be as daft as you like, go
Yeah.
for it. What is it? Because it's something that is daft to them, and it's actually quite annoying. And it's one of them where until I was learning that job and learning my job there, I would never have known that thing. So I am fine with people saying, I've got a daft question. Yeah, go for it. Absolutely. But it's when a person's talking to you and they've already annoyed you in some way, whether it's they've cut you from the original answer you were going to give anyway, or whether they're just being a little bit rude, and then they ask you a question and you think, you're serious, aren't you? Shit, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, some people are there.
Let's put it this way. Usually I get people surprised when I tell them they can't put that new marble stone tile on their plastered wall because plaster won't carry marble.
It's too heavy.
It's too damn heavy. Victorian plaster, absolutely. Modern day plaster,
No
different
chance.
materials, different chemicals, it's weaker, don't bother. Um, but yeah. I mean, I've come across customers. That's the thing with retail, isn't it? Yeah, we
It is.
we encounter we encounter all stripes of people.
That's the way to put it. Interesting, because whether they be from whatever background they're from, whatever income bracket they've got, generally everyone has to come shopping. So you find there's a broad spectrum of people will come in, and their expectations of us and is different because we're not necessarily someone they would see on a day-to-day basis, but they will ask the most ridiculous questions. Like, some people will say, "What's the most daftest customer daftest question a customer's ever asked you. I had a customer who asked me for a vegetarian toothbrush.
Yes, I remember that one.
But
I remember you
when
posting
I
about that.
think about it, is that his question was valid to him.
Yeah.
He generally believed that it wasn't bristle, it was gristle. So he believed that the
Okay.
toothbrush hairs were made of pork, and he was Islamic. So his question actually was a valid
Right.
question to
Okay.
him. Um,
Yeah.
but I had to smile. I was like, "I've just been asked for a vegetarian toothbrush." Something I never thought I'd ever be asked. But no, to him, obviously, he believed that all the hairs were pig hairs. That
Interesting.
it was
Yeah.
bristle. It's like no, it's bristle, not gristle. And
Yeah.
you could see him like, oh, and you can see the you can see it working. But as in terms of an actual question, he just came around and asked, "Do you have any vegetarian toothbrushes?" And I'm just like,
Um, I'm trying to think of the most ridiculous question I've ever been asked. I remember the most ridiculous sounding question because I didn't know it was a real thing. This guy came in once and he was asking. We already sold a product at this point. This is quite a few years ago. We've now got a different version of it. But we sold a product called Beaver Mesh.
okay, what's beaver
Which
mesh?
was Beaver Mesh. Okay, say you've got a whole bunch of mosaic tiles. Okay,
Okay,
so you get a square mosaic, about a foot squared shape, and the mosaic itself is a sheet, a Hessian sheet with individual tiles already stuck on. Okay, so you can cut that down to as thin or as thick as you want, make it into a border, make it into a dido rail, or have it as an entire piece. But all those pieces are stuck on together already. What tends to happen, especially with smaller mosaics, is gravity. When you put a grouting glue on, grouting adhesive on the back. Oh God, grouting adhesive. I sound like a right idiot. When you put adhesive on the back of the mosaic and put it on the wall, the bigger ones tend to be okay. But depending on the quality of your product, of your adhesive, what can happen is that they will sag. Okay,
I get that. I get
yeah,
that.
so you get that kind of weird lipping thing
Okay,
going on, that kind of thing. Okay, beaver mesh is a plastic sheet which has an adhesive on the back, which you peel off the film, and then you put the sheet onto the back of your mosaic, and it keeps it all solid.
okay,
So you can just put your adhesive on, slap it on. There's no sinking.
gotcha. Okay, that makes
Okay,
sense.
cool. So yes, of course, beaver mesh. We had a bit of a bit of a laugh about that. This one guy comes in, and he comes up the counter. He puts his hand on the desk, and he says, "Do you sell flange?" And that was it. My assistant manager was gone. She broke. She went off somewhere and just had to go and laugh her ass off. The shop manager went off another direction. He was like, "Oh, cheers, guys, thanks." And so I'm there talking to him and I'm sorry, sir. We sell something called beaver mesh. Is that what you mean? No, it's definitely a thing called flange. And it turns out flange is a real thing. It's a kind of, if I understood him correctly,
Okay.
it's a kind of border thing which goes on the outside of your window frames,
Oh yeah.
as far as I'm aware.
I've whipped up Google. Let's see what I had on it.
Please do, because I don't think I
So
don't
a
think that's right.
flange is it's a plate ring. Let's see if I can drag this onto the screen. So it appears to be what's with the car actually by the looks of this. So it's a plate or ring to form a rim at the end of a pipe or fastening of a pipe. A flange is a plate for covering and closing the end of a pipe. A flange joint is a connection of pipes. And there's have some pictures on the screen. Have a look at that. Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
There you go.
So I guess yeah, it's the ring at the end of a pipe. So I guess it's the other term also works.
Yeah. It's one of those things, isn't it? What is the most stupid question you've ever been asked? God. As soon as you have to try and think of it, you can't. But when you encounter them,
Oh man, it sticks
they're
with you.
almost forever. Yeah.
That's true. like the vegetarian toothbrush will always do it just because how straight he was with it. And it's like, do you have any vegetarian toothbrushes? I'm just like, so
Yeah.
that was instantly on Facebook, like within 10 minutes.
I've had people come in before saying, "Where's your wallpaper?" And it's like, "We don't. We're a
Yeah,
tile shop. Sorry."
tiles, there's tops
Yeah,
tiles up there.
that's it. That's it. That's the
On that
clues in
note,
the
though,
name.
is that because people would expect it to be something like Wix or people like B&Q, where they would sell a range
I
of that
think it is.
orientation of stock?
I
So,
think it is. In their defence, yeah, I think it is. Um, where they assume that for some reason that as well as doing whatever your company name is, then then you must do other things like that. So why wouldn't you?
so I mean, I guess the tile thing. I've got a friend who's she's got into mosaic picture making.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and that's quite a creative endeavour. And I think that's what everyone's doing at lockdown. Everyone's rediscovered their creative flair.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
because
Yeah.
I think like with this, I go back into podcasting more often, trying to make films more frequently. But obviously for some people, it's a bit more practical. They're getting into the garden, they're making cooking. Heck, this flour is off sale at work because everyone's baking at the moment. But some people making mosaics. Um, and I still wonder where would I even start to do something like that? And I guess you've been working in the tile industry. Do you have people who want to come in and make custom tiles? That can you cut this up so I can make some pieces to make this? Do you get random suggestions like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. We get people coming in saying, "Oh, I've only got one tile," or "I've only got the two floor tiles. Can you cut them up for me?" No, we can't. Sorry, we're not allowed. H&S and all that. Um, and even when we did do that, we charged you for it.
So you
Well, we charged you as a donation to do that, but we're not allowed to do that anymore.
no, really?
Um,
Because I guess if they've got two broken tiles on their wall that are a certain size, it's a bit like, well, I've got to rematch it back up. What do I do?
yeah, that and if that tile's from a different place and we end up breaking it,
Oh yeah, of
you're gonna
course.
are they gonna try and sue us for it? So that's unfortunately because of
Someone
blame
has.
culture,
Yeah,
we've had to stop doing that. It was something that when I started out, we unofficially did because it was down to the manager of the store to whether you could or not. And at the time when I first started about 9 years ago, they did do that. But as time's gone on, obviously the company's got burned or
yeah,
something's happened. We think either way, we got the message through to say, don't do it. You're not allowed anymore.
yeah. When I
Mm.
when I used to work, I used to work in computing. I used to work at a retail computer shop called Time Computers, where we retailed um, computer parts. So they were never made on site. They were assembled at a factory, then sent to the customer directly. So the customer's perception, the computer is brand new, newest spec stuff inside. But in store, some people would come in and they would want like, can you fix this problem with my PC? And we're all like, yeah, of course we can, but we're not. That's not what we do, unfortunately.
Mm.
So as a bit of a side thing, that's what we were doing. We're helping people with
Okay.
general things like my computer's not working, it's not turning on correctly, so we take it to the Mac and fix that problem for them. And at that time, there was no kind of services like that, unless you went to a dedicated shop that did that. So maintaining computers or PCs, as it were, was not a service that was provided. Like PC World have that know-how section or Geek Squad or whatever they're called now. At the time, there was nothing like that. So we found ourselves in that same position. This is like 2000, 2001, where I think a computer had fell over, it got broken, and then a customer was like, "Well, you need to fix it now. You need to pay me. You need to give me a new one." So that's why that stopped. Of much the same reason I can suggest with like they got sued or someone was like they're threatening legal action because they didn't do something right or we broke something that was theirs that we were doing
Yeah.
as a bit of a favour, and it was a bit like so the store did it or they took it upon themselves, and there has to be a company line which is like no, we've got to stop just because it makes sense to, but we can't just in case it
Yeah.
goes wrong. And it's awful
Yeah.
actually because people want that personal service.
Yeah. And once upon a time, we did offer it. I think back in early 2000s, especially, it may have been done, but it was on its way out when I joined. And for whatever reason, for whatever reason, whether it's legal, whether it's just watching the backs of the staff, we just got told you're not allowed. Don't do it.
Yeah,
So if there was a story there, I don't know it.
fair enough.
It's all speculation at the minute. But yeah, not allowed. But we do get people coming in saying, do you have any crates of broken tiles that we can just take bits of? Again, we're not allowed to give those either
Oh, really?
because that's definitely a health and safety thing.
So yes, people could potentially get cut because again, my understanding
Yeah.
of tiles is quite. I don't know, but I'm assuming they're kind of rounded off at the edges, like filed, are they, or to be smooth, so there's no sharp
Depends.
edges.
Depends on the tile. Some of them are smooth at the edge. Most of them have a 90. Most of them have a corner, which is more often than not slightly beveled, ever so slightly, and smoothed off. But you've got a whole bunch of ones which have got just completely straight or rectified edges, which can be sharp. And if we've got broken tiles in a delivery, we put them into a crate. We build this crate up, wrap it all up, and send it back because actually they do get reused. They get separated, so stone from clay, and then get powdered down, reused into more tiles in the future.
I was going to say I wonder what the recycling process would be. Yeah, I guess is to break it down into remake
But
it.
but those broken shards we are not allowed to give to the public whatsoever.
Oh, right. So I guess they are a bit of a stabbing instrument in some regard.
Exactly.
That's crazy to think about, isn't it? Like, we have these almost fears of what could happen and what we.
Yeah. But I think that's a result of blame culture, isn't it? You
Yeah.
know, oh no, I tripped over my own shoelace, therefore I'm going to sue the shoe company for
Should have
selling these shoes, which I think got thrown out of court. I think that actually happened. Someone was actually that stupid enough to try and sue for a shoe company because they did trip over their own shoelaces, and the court told them, "Get out. You're wasting
So I guess
public time and funds."
there's no instructions with shoes, is there? So maybe
It doesn't need to be.
is that kind of what it is? Is that what their argument was? Well, there's got to be a blame here. It didn't come with instructions.
Yeah.
I didn't know to do this. Maybe there was a claim. Who knows? But people sue for anything.
But going back to the paranormal investigation thing, so what me and Craig have been doing, because we can't go anywhere at the minute, is we've been making stories.
Yeah, I've been seeing that. That's what I've been seeing on your Facebook. It's about your storytelling.
Oh, that's a different project. That's just me.
Okay.
And I've got a friend called Dee Adams. She does all my editing and puts all the little inserts in there for me. She's great at that. But Haunted has its own little story thing going on,
Okay.
which is actual. So, for example, the first one is the dummy that you practice CPR with,
Okay.
and it's mainly the macabre of that, because the actual face that's on there is the face of a woman who died 200 years ago.
Well, I guess it would have been moulded on her face at some point. Now it's been reused all this
That's
time.
right.
Oh, okay.
That's right. So, whereas the second one is the story of the hairy hands of Dartmoor, and then the next one after that is Jenny Greenteeth, and then I finished Black Shuck, and that should be put out as a podcast rather than a
Video.
YouTube episode like we've done before. That was meant to be out on Friday. I don't know if something's gone wrong, but I'll check into that. So we've been doing that instead to try and gain interest in Haunted. Whereas the storytelling thing, that's my own personal project. I've been meaning to do that for the best part of a year and never got around to doing it. So lockdown, I was putting some washing away in that weird way of repetition acts, and you start thinking, and I just suddenly thought, you're supposedly a storyteller. Put a story out every Sunday or something. Oh yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah, let's do that. So that's where that idea came from.
I always find that my own bugbear of myself is I'm kind of a bit. I wouldn't say perfectionist is too strong a word, but like I don't like recording or talking about something that's already been done by somebody else. So I deliberately make my stuff. It has to be original. It's kind of like what I stick by. So whatever it is that I write or whatever it is I produce and talk about, it has to be from an original perspective that is new and will add a layer to a story as opposed to repeating a story that I've read. Or because you've seen 1,000 YouTube videos where they're showing a website and they're just reading the story off and that's their content. Or they have.
I've not seen that
Oh,
actually.
there's loads. It's like generally like news. They're talking about a news subject, for instance, or they'll show a website and they'll just talk through the news. So effectively, it's almost a form of plagiarism in a way because they're reading someone else's content. And
Right. No. I see what you mean. Like for example, he is a YouTube channel talking to you about how that news report was fake. You know, like for example,
that's an example. Yeah.
Russia's employed lions to make sure people are in lockdown, and actually this is from a photo back in 2009 because one lion escaped from the zoo. But there'll be someone on YouTube talking about it in full detail and even showing you all the
they'll generally just go down the webpage. It'll be like a story about. It could be about a story about Doctor Who and the ratings are failing, and they'll talk. But that will be the content of their 20-minute video. Will be them reviewing a piece of paper of an article that was in the Radio Times. And they'll read the article. And it's like that is not content. You know, that is just you talking about it and then throwing a few of your own opinions in there. So what I mean is So the reason why some things take a long time for me to produce is that I'm literally writing it from scratch. You know, I write from the beginning, and when I hear stories about like ghost stories or mythology or folklore that I really engage with, I need to add something to it before I put it out there. So I tend to find that my stuff is a little bit inconsistent with how often I put stuff out there. So I've kind of done more gaming related stuff. So I did like 4 gaming documentaries, like 15-20 minutes long, heavily and well edited, really well scripted. And because I realized that I made a video about 5 years ago that has got about 200,000 views on it, but it's a gaming orientated one, which is not something I tend to do. I wanted to do more podcast, more documentary material. So I thought, well, maybe I should hybrid both. Maybe I should do a gaming documentary. So I've done 4 of those now. They're well done, they're well produced, well edited, and their audience is quite, I'd say, niche but popular. So I thought I will carry on doing that. But actually, my kind of my calling is to talk about myths, folklore, odd stories, a little bit of the Fortean, the stories that make you're left thinking, oh, what happens? Can I learn a little bit more? And to kind of leave the audience member, the viewer, with a sense of wonder. I like people to feel wonder, and that I should go and find out more.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah.
And I like this conversation here. I think a lot of people will go, oh, there's a lot of different kinds of things in there. Let me go find out more about this. Let me find out about your storytelling. Let me go find out more about haunting. Let me go find out about this. I want people to have that as opposed to going, I'm presenting all the facts and information. Here we go.
Okay. So shameless plug. My YouTube channel is called Night Tales. That's Night Tales. Night S Tales. And I've only got 2 stories on there in a minute because it's brand new. I only put it up about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you. And those stories, because someone. Do you know a local director called John Shelton?
I do, yeah. I know him, yes.
I thought you did, yeah. He's a friend of mine, and he commented and saying, that was a good reading. And I have to point out, none of my stories are read. I'm doing that on top of my head, just looking at the camera.
Okay.
The only time I've read anything was in the last one, where I had the poem of Taliesin in my book. So I had to open my book and read that out. That's the only bit of reading I do. But apart from that, the stories I research. I'll look into the story in more depth because I love detail.
Me too.
I love detail so much that my editor has to trim it down a bit. Because I think it adds something to it. And I research it. I'll find a story, I'll research it, and I'll enact it a couple times until I've got it, and then I'll just do it for the camera. that's it. And these are tales on mythology and tales on legend, because to me they're interesting,
Yeah.
and I hope that whoever watches them and likes them, they find them interesting too. So, the original idea was to do these a bit like Jack and Nori. So I'm looking into the camera, talking about the story, and then a little bit like The League of Gentlemen, where I'll be dressed in costume later on and doing a stupid accent for a king or for a witch or something like that. And I think I will get to that point, but not at the minute. I'm just happy just researching, looking at the camera, having a few photos in between, and then carrying on.
Okay.
And that's what they are at the minute. But I will eventually go into that phase of,
Let's get a
looking
costume.
into making, even if it's the colander on the head with a bit of red tape to represent St. George or something like that for a St. George story or something, something daft like that, just to give it a bit more extra. So yeah, Knight's Tales on YouTube.
I shall be sure to.
I apologise, there's only two, but
No,
have a look.
everything starts somewhere, and everything's like, the 1,000-mile journey begins with the first step kind of thing. It comes from a position, of humility and being humble, and this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to go forward, and, give me a sponsor if you like the content, and, let's keep going. Help me and I'll help you. That's
Exactly.
and that's the kind of conversations that I think people are really connected with. And there's quite a few podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis that have a very similar style to that, like... there's a show called Creepy, which is it's a presenter who reads creepypasta, the various stories that are on there.
I know of creepypasta because I follow a YouTube channel called Bedtime Stories,
Ah, yeah, I know that, yeah.
and those guys are great. In fact, they're so great that me and Craig, when making the stories for Haunted, or its full name on YouTube, Haunted Paranormal Investigations, if you find the one with the Lady of Lassien, Hairy Hands of Dartmoor, and Jenny Greenteeth, that's us. Bedtime stories are that good. We've tried everything we can to not copy them.
That's hard, isn't it? When there's a formula out there that is successful. It's like, well, how do
Yeah.
I differentiate myself? How do I not do that?
Yeah.
And I'm exactly the same position. I need to be a little bit.
Yeah.
I need to be unique as opposed to doing what's already popular.
And so when you look at the comments of a lot of stuff on Bedtime Stories, you'll get a lot of references to creepypasta. So I've never actually got that interest of going to creepypasta because I thought, oh, right, so by the gist of it, it's just basically a cobbling of tales and ghost stories that people have just kind of made up for a laugh. All right,
Effectively,
I'm not interested in
Yeah,
I'm not interested in
So
it.
that's the thing, is that you're not quite sure because they border the line of believability.
Yeah.
But I guess most of them are, obviously for the imagination, because that's left to the audience, the listener to discern, really. But obviously, a lot of them have become really popular, like the Slender Man, for instance. That took on its own, persona. But so yeah, so Creepy Podcast is like that. They read stories that are on there.
Yeah. Oh, Black-Eyed Children. Black-Eyed Children. That's my favourite one because, not because I like it, because I don't. It's my favourite example to use where I call bullshit. Because you're not that old from me, are you? I'm 40 this year.
I'm the same age as
40
you.
this year.
So I'm 39, so.
Oh, bless you, mate. So I'm 40 in August. So that means there's a very good chance that you and me both read the same kind of mystery books and ghost books back in school.
The Osborne
and
Book of
college.
Ghosts,
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Osborne Book of Ghosts. And then if you wanted to really shit yourself up, you got the Hamlin Book of Ghosts because the watercolours in those were terrifying. And most of them were from like the 1970s as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at no point in any of these books, covering years of stories from whenever, at not one point is there any reference to a Slender Man or a Black-Eyed Children. And the fact that you got all this crap about Black-Eyed Children's been documented since the 1800s. No, it hasn't. Stop lying. It's an internet sensation. It's an internet sensation. It's bullshit. Same as Slender Man. That was never really a thing either.
No.
It's just, again, it's an internet thing. So on one hand, it's really interesting how there's a folklore that's developed from the internet. But on the other hand, it kind of questions you into how gullible people are, and how memory can be false.
Yeah, it's like I was listening to it was a Coast to Coast episode actually, maybe about 3-4 years ago, and he's the person who was an investigator, and he wrote a case that was then embellished as a movie, and that movie then became the Bye Bye Man. Now he was which is a bit like the Slender Man. It's taken its own internet perspective.
Okay.
It's now evolved to become its own thing, like The Conjuring. It's a story based on a story that was based on an investigation. So this guy wrote
Right. Okay.
this. So this guy was the writer of the investigation that he did, that then then someone then wrote a fictional book, a bit like say how Dan Brown's books are, or a fictional take on some factual information that kind of becomes its own thing. So he was that guy. So then someone wrote the Bye Bye Man, that's now become its internet sensational thing, a bit like Candyman, how you say his name to a mirror 5 times and he appears, that kind of thing.
Okay, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's now become a series on Netflix. It's taken on this modern internet perspective. Has now taken a story that was a person's seeing someone in their house to being a whole mythos of story behind it. And that's crazy to consider how just the internet causes that to happen. And incidentally, he was the guy who wrote a story about MK Ultra back in the day that became the basis of a number of the Stranger Things episodes, and he's credited at the end of the episode as being one of the people who as a producer of it. And it's like, oh, then that was happened to be his story that they've added to that, and it's like, oh, that's an interesting way of it being characterized onwards.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's weird how stories do evolve like that, and they take on new personalities, new faces.
Yeah. There was a story that Bedtime Stories covered the other day, who I've never heard of before, which I'm inclined to think is bullshit. But that's the thing about Bedtime Stories. They do stories, they don't do facts. They do it because it's entertaining. And that's why I like them so much as well. The Grinning Man. Who is the Grinning Man? And they talk about this almost reptilian being by the name of Indrid Cold, is it, or something like that? And there's links between how it could be one of the Men in Black or something like that. Little tie-ins like that. But again, in the same books that you and I grew up reading and looking into, and they were never there.
No,
exactly. Yes, we'd heard of the Men in Black, but we never heard of Indrid Cold or Grinning Man or Shadow People or anything like that.
Yeah, so when did Shadow Men appear? That's an interesting one. When did that
I became aware of the Shadow People, as in the 14 times and stuff.
I guess you're right. So 14 times, I guess.
Yeah. So late 90s, early 2000s, something like that.
Yeah. Because people claim that these beings that follow them around, or they're in their house, and they have a malevolent presence, and they sometimes wear a hat, and some have different feelings that are given off by them. But there's a few pictures but you can just say they're shadows, because that's what they are.
Yeah.
Or
someone's silhouetted. Although interestingly, I did see a what could be described as a shadow person before when I was living in London many years ago now. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and for some reason I looked at the bedroom door, and from the bedroom door there was like a small bit which leads into the bathroom door. I say small bit. In between the door from the bedroom to the bathroom, there's like a small bit that goes against the wall. So that's where the computer was at the time. But I distinctly saw the form of a well-built, muscular male person, no hair, just walking from the wall into the living room. And I was fucking terrified. I just did what anybody else would do in that real situation. I want to go in my ghost-proof duvet.
The ghost-proof duvet is it's such the greatest protection for anyone ever.
Exactly. And no, there was no red eyes. There was no hats. This person was entirely black. You know, he was made of the stuff Night's made of. Um, no discerning features. No, I couldn't tell you the shape of his jaw or anything like that. It was just a humanoid form, black. That was it. Whether that's a shadow person or not, I have no idea. I didn't think it was an intruder because of the way he was walking. I imagine an intruder would be there would have been noise for a start, and footsteps, movement, possible crouching to try and stay hidden or something, but nothing. This guy was walking straight profile, straight backed, walking with intent from a wall into the living room, into the other wall, I guess. I don't know, I didn't see that far.
Wow. So a lot of people say, how did you feel at the time? And I guess a lot of people's fear is it's fear.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not going to say it was some kind of supernatural instilled fear. It was just what the fuck is that?
Yeah, because like you're in
that
my
kind of fear.
space. You know, the doors are locked. How did you get in here? So all these kind of things are running through your mind, and
Yeah.
you know that you're alone, or you know that you know that there's no one else here, and now all of a sudden you've just seen an entity, and yeah, it's fear. So I wonder if that's what it is. You know, that's why people say you always feel fear when you see a shadow person. It's because that's
Yeah.
you're not expecting to see them there.
Yeah, in all possibility, it was perhaps me being in a hypnagogic state. You know, like I said, I just woke up,
Yeah,
and whether my dream mind was still going or not, I have no idea. Either way, I saw a figure, and that was it.
the most
Nothing's.
frequent thing I saw when I lived at my mother's house in Bulwell Hall. We lived on the very top of the hill, actually. A garden with very strange stuff that would happen on it. We had like lightning would hit the garden regularly. So we think there was like iron ore in the ground or something there because
Okay.
lightning would hit the ground in the garden very frequently. It's a burn patch now. So in the house near the back door specifically, actually, I would often see someone or something come past me that was about I would put it about this height, so it's about the same height as my hip, and it would be like the kind of shape of a large dog. I wouldn't say the shape was a dog because I never saw the shape. I would just when you something's walking past and you would react to it, or you would someone's thrown something and your brain's instantly reacting to move away from it or catch it. It was that kind of feeling where I would react to if I'm carrying my dinner, for instance. I'd be like, whoa, and you see this kind of shadow go past you, and that happened. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and it was always the same shit, same kind of space in the kitchen, and I've always put it down to being it was a spectral dog or a shadow pet or something, or or even just my imagination. Just it perhaps happened once, and therefore my brain was wondering would it happen again, but subconsciously, and thus it did. I don't know, but I saw that regularly, and it got to the point where I was a bit like, whoa, okay, I wouldn't be.
Okay, I got a question for you in that case. Did this occur only when there was lightning, or
No, this would happen even the day, or generally in the evenings, when there would
and
be subdued light, though.
did you ever see its head?
No, just the shape, the overall shape.
Interesting. And the reason I said it's interesting is because I've just done my recording on my podcast for the black dog,
Okay.
and black dogs, like black shuck, they can sometimes appear with no head.
Oh, that's
Yours is quite small by the sound of it, because usually they're quite bigger. But it's possibly it could even be a black dog. It's a demigorgon.
Good.
That's
Well, we
what it
could.
is.
Did love Stranger Things. Stranger Things is just good.
Oh, it's great. I love it.
I mean, it looks like season 4 though is not going to come out until for another year and a half now due to the lockdown. So
It's what it is.
and I think
It's what it is.
they're going to have to force it to become like the 90s now because the actors, of course, are now 3 years older from the last season or 2 years older. So they're going to set it in the first 90s as opposed to 88.
Interesting.
Yeah, I read a blurb about that the other day. So the soundtrack's going to evolve.
I don't know. I quite like it being in the 80s,
Oh,
but that's me.
me too. I found the love in the last couple of years of like retro wave music. That kind of synth wave. The 80s
Yeah.
style, but made now. Just yeah, kind of has that nice
Yeah.
buzz of good music.
Yeah.
Because I guess the 80s vision of the future isn't what has come to be, is it?
No.
The neon lights.
Because it's like that meme, going back to memes again, where it said back when what we thought the apocalypse was going to be, and it shows all the Mad Max style gimp outfits and huge Mohicans and hubcaps being used as shoulder plates and stuff.
Yeah.
What it really is. Everyone walking around in pajamas and carrying cups of tea.
Trying to hunt down toilet roll.
Yeah.
In my head now, what's just popped in there is the in Mad Max 2, of course, you had the massive oil rig. It was full of sand, of course, as a distraction. But for me, that was that double decker that came to Asda full of toilet roll.
Yeah.
And everyone's running after
That's
it with like crazy bikes and guns and spears and trying to hunt down the toilet roll truck. Oh man, I wonder how long we've actually been talking. Oh man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
We have been talking a while. So shall we
We
round
have.
up here then, and
Yes.
share off your websites and your social media where people can find you and the names of your
Okay.
projects and so on.
Okay. So my on WordPress, my blog is called A Wise Fool. I write a lot about my druidry, which is the flavour of paganism that I do, and you can find that on loxley2010.wordpress.com. My YouTube channels are Knight's Tales, so Knight 'S Tales, and there's Haunted Paranormal Investigation, and I've only just got on Instagram because I'm an old guy,
Me too.
and my Instagram is Dylan Knight, which is my acting name, Dylan Knight 1701.
Okay, so that'll point people in the right direction of your social media and what it is that you've got going on in your life. So if anyone wants to follow David here, you're more than welcome to do so, or Dylan is in his acting form. But dude, it's absolutely lovely to talk to you again, man. It's been
You too.
oh man, it kind of feels like the old days. It's like being in the pub at the
Doesn't
Dragon.
Which means that as soon as lockdown's done and everyone's allowed back into pubs, we'll have to meet up.
Absolutely.